Not bad. Man, I was streaming for a minute and I didn't have the sound on, but I'm here now. Hello, I'm back. I didn't think I was going to be here tonight, but work didn't need me after all. So, let's see. I'll work on something for a little bit. Oh, wait, I've already finished this comic. I need to work on that comic. I do sometimes. Hmm. Oops. I should have shown that. This? Yeah, there it is. Shit. Give me 1 second. Music, maybe? But what? Let me see how much I can listen to my Audible before it fucking I was listening to that cemetery. But I don't know if it's gonna like fucking copyright me. If it does, I'm gonna have to switch to something else. I'd go to listen to an AI talk, which I don't like, but
Oh, it didn't feel silly. No. Lewis went to the door on feet he could not feel and lifted the latch with nerveless fingers. And as he swung it open, he thought, "It'll be Pascal. Like they said about Jim Morrison, back from the dead and bigger than ever." Pascal standing there in his jogging shorts, big as life and as moldy as month-old bread. Pascal with his horribly ruined head. Pascal bringing the warning again. Don't go up there. What was that old song by the Animals? Baby, please don't go. Baby, please don't go. You know I love you so. Baby, please don't go.
baby,
The door
please,
swung
baby,
open,
please.
and standing there on his front step in the blowing dark of this midnight, between the day of the funeral parlor visitation and the day of his son's burial, was Judd Crandall. His thin white hair blew randomly in the chilly dark. Lewis tried to laugh. Time seemed to have turned cleverly back on itself. It was Thanksgiving again. Soon they would put the stiff, unnaturally thickened body of Ellie's cat, Winston Churchill, into a plastic garbage bag and start off. "Oh, do not ask what is it. Let us go and make our visit." "Can I come in, Lewis?" Judd asked. He took a pack of Chesterfields from his shirt pocket and poked one in his mouth. "Tell you what," Lewis said. "It's late and I've been drinking a pile of beer." "Yeah, I could smell it," Judd said. He struck a match. The wind snuffed it. He struck another around cupped hands, but the hands trembled and betrayed the match to the wind again. He got a third match, prepared to strike it, and then looked up at Lewis standing in the doorway. "I can't get this thing lit," Judd said. "Gonna let me in or not, Lewis?" Lewis stepped aside and let Judd walk in. 38. They sat at the kitchen table over beers. First time we've ever tipped one in our kitchen, Lewis thought, a little surprised. Halfway across the living room, Ellie had cried out in her sleep, and both of them had frozen like statues in a children's game. The cry had not been repeated. "Okay," Lewis said. "What are you doing over here at 12:15 on the morning my son gets buried?" "You're a friend, Judd, but this is stretching it." Judd drank, wiped his mouth with the heel of his hand, and looked directly at Lewis. There was something clear and positive in his eyes, and Lewis at last looked down from it. "You know why I'm here," Judd said. "You're thinking about things that are not to be thought of, Lewis. Worse still, I fear you're considering them." "I wasn't thinking about anything but going up to bed," Lewis said. "I have a burying to go to tomorrow." "I'm responsible for more pain in your heart than you should have tonight," Judd said softly. "For all I know, I may even have been responsible for the death of your son." Lewis looked up, startled. "What? Judd, don't talk crazy." "You are thinking of trying to put him up there," Judd said. "Don't you deny the thought has crossed your mind, Lewis." Lewis did not reply. "How far does its influence extend?" Judd said. "Can you tell me that?" "No, I can't answer that question myself, and I've lived my whole life in this patch of the world. I know about the Micmacs, and that place was always considered to be a kind of holy place to them. But not in a good way. Stanny B told me that. My father told me too, later on, after Spot died the second time. Now the Micmacs, the state of Maine, and the government of the United States are arguing in court about who owns that land. Who does own it? No one really knows, Lewis. Not anymore. Different people laid claim to it at one time or another, but no claim ever stuck. Anson Ludlow, the great-grandson of this town's founding father, for one. His claim was maybe the best for a white man, since Joseph Ludlow the Elder had the whole shebang as a grant from good King Georgie, back when Maine was just a big province of the Massachusetts Bay Colony. But even then, he would have been in a hell of a court fight because there was cross-claims to the land by other Ludlows, and by a fellow named Peter Dimmitt, who claimed he could prove pretty convincingly that he was a Ludlow on the other side of the sheets. And Joseph Ludlow the Elder was money poor but land rich toward the end of his life, and every now and then he'd just gift somebody with 200 or 400 acres when he got into his cups. "Were none of those deeds recorded?" Lewis asked, fascinated in spite of himself. "Oh, they were regular bears for recording deeds, were our grandfathers," Judd said, lighting a new cigarette from the butt of the old one. "The original grant on your land goes like this." Judd closed his eyes and quoted. From the great old maple which stands atop Quintsbury Ridge to the verge of Orrington Stream, thus runneth the tract from north until south. Judd grinned without much humor. But the great old maple fell down in 1882, let's say, and was rotted to moss by the year 1900, and Orrington Stream silted up and turned to marsh in the 10 years between the end of the Great War and the crash of the stock market. A nice mess it made. It ended up not mattering to old Anson anyways. He was struck and killed by lightning in 1921, right up around where that burying ground is. Lewis stared at Judd. Judd sipped his beer. It don't matter. There's lots of places where the history of ownership is so tangled it never gets unraveled. Only the lawyers end up making money. Hell, Dickens knew that. I suppose the Indians will get it back in the end, and I think that's the way it should be. But that don't really matter, Lewis. I came over here tonight to tell you about Timmy Baderman and his dad. Who's Timmy Baderman? Timmy Baderman was one of the 20 or so boys from Ludlow that went overseas to fight Hitler. He left in 1942. He come back in a box with a flag on the top of it in 1943. He died in Italy. His daddy, Bill Baderman, lived his whole life in this town. He about went crazy when he got the telegram. And then he quieted right down. He knew about the Micmac burying ground, you see, and he decided what he wanted to do. The chill was back. Lewis stared at Judd for a long time, trying to read the lie in the old man's eyes. It was not there. But the fact of this story surfacing just now was damned convenient. Why didn't you tell me this the other night? He said finally. After we did the cat? When I asked you if anyone had ever buried a person up there, you said no one ever had. Because you didn't need to know, Judd said. Now you do. Lewis was silent for a long time. Was he the only one? The only one I know of personally, Judd said gravely. The only one to ever try it? I doubt that, Lewis. I doubt it very much. I'm kind of like the preacher in Ecclesiastes. I don't believe there's anything new under the sun. Oh, sometimes the glitter they sprinkle over the top of a thing changes, but that's all. What's been tried once has been tried once before, and before, and before. He looked down at his liver-spotted hands. In the living room, the clock softly chimed 12:30. I decided that a man in your profession is used to looking at symptoms and seeing the diseases underneath. And I decided I had to talk straight to you when Mortensen down at the funeral home told me you'd ordered a grave liner instead of a ceiling vault. Lewis looked at Judd for a long time, saying nothing. Judd flushed deeply but didn't look away. Finally, Lewis said, Sounds like maybe you did a little snooping, Judd. I am sorry because of it. I didn't ask him which you bought. Not right out, maybe. But Judd did not reply, and although his blush had deepened even more, his complexion was approaching a plum color now. His eyes still didn't waver. At last, Lewis sighed. He felt unutterably tired. Oh, fuck it, I don't care. Maybe you're even right. Maybe it was on my mind. If it was on the downside of it. I didn't think much about what I was ordering. I was thinking about Gage. I know you were thinking about Gage, but you knew the difference. Your uncle was an undertaker. Yes, he had known the difference. A ceiling vault was a piece of construction work, something which was meant to last a long, long time. Concrete was poured into a rectangular mold reinforced with steel rods, and then after the graveside services were over, a crane lowered a slightly curved concrete top into place. The lid was sealed with a substance like the hot patch highway departments used to fill potholes. Uncle Carl had told Lewis that sealant, trade named Everlock, got itself a fearsome grip after all that weight had been on it for a while. Uncle Carl, who liked to yarn as much as anyone, at least when he was with his own kind, and Lewis, who had worked with him summers for a while, qualified as a sort of apprentice undertaker, told his nephew of an exhumation order he'd gotten once from the Cook County DA's office. Uncle Carl went out to Groveland to oversee the exhumation. They could be tricky things, he said. People whose only ideas concerning disinterral came from those horror movies starring Boris Karloff as Dr. Frankenstein's monster and Dwight Fry as Igor had an entirely wrong impression. Opening a ceiling vault was no job for two men with picks and shovels, not unless they had about 6 weeks to spend on the job. This one went all right, at first. The grave was opened, and the crane grappled onto the top of the vault, only the top didn't just pull off as it was supposed to. The whole vault, its concrete sides already a little wet and discolored, started to rise out of the ground instead. Uncle Carl screamed for the crane operator to back off. Uncle Carl wanted to go back to the mortuary and get some stuff that would weaken the sealant's grip a bit. The crane operator either didn't hear, or wanted to go for the whole thing, like a little kid playing with a toy crane and junk prizes in a penny arcade. Uncle Carl said that the damn fool almost got it too. The vault was 3/4 of the way out. Uncle Carl and his assistant could hear water pattering from the underside of the vault onto the floor of the grave. It had been a wet week in Chicagoland, when the crane just tipped over and went kerplunk into the grave. The crane operator crashed into the windshield and broke his nose. That day's festivities cost Cook County roughly $3,000, $2,100 over the usual price of such gay goings-on. The real point of the story for Uncle Carl was that the crane operator had been elected president of the Chicago local of the Teamsters 6 years later. Grave liners were simpler matters. Such a liner was no more than a humble concrete box, open at the top. It was set into the grave on the morning of a funeral. Following the services, the coffin was lowered into it. The sextons then brought on the top, which was usually in 2 segments. These segments were lowered vertically into the ends of the grave, where they stood up like bookends. Iron rings were embedded into the concrete at the ends of each segment. The sextons would run lengths of chain through them and lower them gently onto the top of the grave liner. Each section would weigh 60, perhaps 70 pounds, 80 tops, and no sealer was used. It was easy enough for a man to open a grave liner. That's what Judd was implying. Easy enough for a man to disinter the body of his son and bury it someplace else. Shh, shh, we will not speak of such things. These are secret things. Yes, I guess I knew the difference between a sealing vault and a grave liner, Lewis said. But I wasn't thinking about what you think I was thinking about. Lewis, it's late, Lewis said. It's late, I'm drunk, and my heart aches. If you feel like you have to tell me this story, then tell me and let's get it over with. Maybe I should have started with martinis, he thought. Then I could have been safely passed out when he came knocking. All right, Lewis. Thank you. Just go on. Judd paused a moment, thinking, then began to speak. 39. In those days, back during the war, I mean, the train still stopped in Orrington, and Bill Baderman had a funeral hack there at the loading depot to meet the freight carrying the body of his son Timmy. The coffin was unloaded by 4 railroad men. I was one of them. There was an Army fellow on board from Graves and Registration. That was the Army's wartime version of undertakers, Lewis. But he never got off the train. He was sitting drunk in a boxcar that still had 12 coffins in it. We put Timmy into the back of a mortuary Cadillac. In those days, it still wasn't uncommon to hear such things called hurry-up wagons, because in the old days, the major concern was to get them into the ground before they rotted. Bill Baderman stood by, his face stony and kinda dry, I guess you'd say. He wept no tears. Huey Garber was driving the train that day, and he said that Army fella had really had a tour for himself. Huey said they'd flown in a whole shitload of those coffins to Limestone and Presque Isle, at which point both the coffins and their keeper entrained for Point South. The Army fella comes walking up to Huey, and he takes a fifth of rye whiskey out of his uniform blouse, and he says in this soft, drawly Dixie voice, "Well, Mr. Engineer, you're driving a mystery train today. Did you know that?" Huey shakes his head. "Well, you are. At least that's what they call a funeral train down in Alabama." Huey says the fellow took a list out of his pocket and squinted at it. "We're going to stop by dropping 2 of those coffins off in Holton, and then I've got 1 for Passadumkeag, 2 for Bangor, 1 for Derry, 1 for Ludlow, and so on. I feel like a fucking milkman. You want a drink?"
Yep.
Well, Huey declines a drink on the grounds that the Bangor and the Aroostook is pretty fussy on the subject of train drivers with rye on their breaths, and the fellow from Graves and Registration don't hold it against Huey, any more than Huey holds the fact of the Army fellow's drunkenness against him. They even shook on her, Huey said. So off they go, dropping those flag-covered coffins every other stop or two. 18 or 20 of them in all. Huey said it went all the way to Boston, and there was weeping and wailing relatives at every stop, except Ludlow. And at Ludlow, he was treated to the sight of Bill Baderman, who he said looked like he was dead inside, and just waiting for his soul to stink. When he got off that train, he said he woke up that Army fella, and they hit some spots, 15 or 20, and Huey got drunker than he had ever been, and went to a whore, which he'd never done in his whole life. He woke up with a set of crabs so big and mean that they gave him the shivers. He said that if that was what they called a mystery train, he never wanted to drive no mystery train again. Timmy's body was taken up to the Greenspan Funeral Home on Fern Street. It used to be across from where the new Franklin Laundry stands now. And 2 days later, he was buried in Pleasant View Cemetery with full military honors. Well, I tell you, Lewis, Mrs. Baderman was dead 10 years then, along with the second child she tried to bring into the world, and that had a lot to do with what happened. A second child might have helped to ease the pain, don't you think? A second child might have reminded old Bill that there's others that feel the pain and have to be helped through. I guess in that way you're luckier, having another child and all, I mean. A child and a wife who are both alive and well. According to the letter Bill got from the lieutenant in charge of his boy's platoon, Timmy was shot down on the road to Rome on July 15, 1943. His body was shipped home 2 days later, and it got to Limestone on the 19th. It was put aboard Huey Garber's mystery train the very next day. Most of the GIs who got killed in Europe were buried in Europe, but all of the boys who went home on that train were special. Timmy had died charging a machine gun nest, and he had won the Silver Star, posthumously. Timmy was buried. Don't hold me to this, but I think it was on July 22nd. It was 4 or 5 days later that Marjorie Washburn, who was the mail woman in those days, saw Timmy walking up towards York's livery stable. Well, Margie damn near drove right off the road, and you can understand why. She went back to the post office, tossed her leather bag with all her undelivered mail still in it on George Anderson's desk, and told him she was going home and to bed right then. "Margie, are you sick?" George asks. "You are just as white as a gull's wing." "I've had the fright of my life, and I don't want to talk to you about it," Margie Washburn says. "I ain't going to talk to Brian about it, or my mom, or anybody. When I get up to heaven, if Jesus asks me to talk to him about it, maybe I will. But I don't believe it." And out she goes. Everybody knew Timmy was dead. There was his obituary in the Bangor Daily News and the Ellsworth American just the week before, picture and all, and half the town turned out for his funeral up to the city. And here Margie seen him, walking up the road, lurching up the road, she finally told old George Anderson. Only this was 20 years later, and she was dying. And
Don't
George
go
told her it
down
seemed
that
to him like
road.
she wanted to tell somebody what she'd seen. George said it seemed to him like it preyed on her mind, you know. Pale he was, she said, and dressed in an old pair of chino pants and a faded flannel hunting shirt, although it must have been 90 degrees in the shade that day. Margie said all his hair was sticking up in the back. His eyes were like raisins stuck in bread dough. I saw a ghost that day, George. That's what scared me so. I never thought I'd see such a thing, but there it was. Well, word got around. Pretty soon some other people saw Timmy too. Mrs. Stratton. Well, we called her Mrs., but so far as anyone knew, she could have been single or divorced or grass-widowed. She had a little two-room house down where the Peterson Road joins the Hancock Road, and she had a lot of jazz records, and sometimes she'd be willing to throw you a little party if you had a $10 bill that wasn't working too hard. Well, she saw him from a porch, and she said he walked right up to the edge of the road and stopped there. He just stood there, she said, his hands dangling at his sides and his head pushed forward, looking like a boxer who's ready to eat him some canvas. She said she stood there on a porch, heart going like 60, too scared to move. Then she said he turned around, and it was like watching a drunk man trying to do an about-face. One leg went way out, and the other foot turned, and he just about fell over. She said he looked right at her, and all the strength just run out of her hands, and she dropped the basket of washing she had, and the clothes fell out and got smutty all over again. She said his eyes, she said they looked as dead and dusty as marbles, Louis. But he saw her, and he grinned, and she said he talked to her, asked her if she still had those records, because he wouldn't mind cutting a rug with her. Maybe that very night. And Mrs. Stratton went back inside, and she wouldn't come out for most of a week, and by then it was over anyway. A lot of people saw Timmy Bateman. Many of them are dead now. Mrs. Stratton is, for one, and others have moved on. But there are a few old crocs like me left around who'll tell you, if you ask 'em right. We saw him, I tell you, walking back and forth along the Peterson Road, a mile east of his daddy's house and a mile west. Back and forth he went, back and forth all day, and for all anyone knew, all night. Shirt untucked, pale face, hair all stuck up in spikes, fly unzipped sometimes, and this look on his face. This look. Judd paused to light a cigarette, then shook the match out and looked at Louis through the haze of drifting blue smoke. And although the story was, of course, utterly mad, there was no lie in Judd's eyes. You know, they have these stories and these movies. I don't know if they're true, about zombies down in Haiti. In the movies, they just sort of shamble along, with their dead eyes staring straight ahead, real slow and sort of clumsy. Timmy Bateman was like that, Louis, like a zombie in a movie. But he wasn't. There was something more. There was something going on behind his eyes, and sometimes you could see it and sometimes you couldn't see it. Something behind his eyes, Louis. I don't think that thinking is what I want to call it. I don't know what in the hell I want to call it. It was sly, that was one thing. Like him telling Mrs. Stratton he wanted to cut a rug with her. There was something going on in there, Louis, but I don't think it was thinking, and I don't think it had much, maybe nothing at all, to do with Timmy Bateman. It was more like a radio signal that was coming from somewhere else. You looked at him and you thought, if he touches me, I'm gonna scream. Like that. Back and forth he went, up and down the road. And one day after I got home from work, this must have been, I'm gonna say it was July 30th or so, here is George Anderson, the postmaster, don't you know, sitting on my back porch drinking iced tea with Hannibal Benson, who was then our second selectman, and Alan Purinton, who was fire chief. Norma sat there too, but never said a thing. George kept rubbing the stump at the top of his right leg. Lost most of that leg working on the railroad, he did, and the stump used to bother him something fierce on those hot and muggy days. But here he was, misery or not. This has gone far enough, George says to me. I got a mail woman who won't deliver out on the Peterson Road. That's one thing. It's starting to raise Cain with the government, and that's something else. What do you mean it's raising Cain with the government? I asked. Hannibal said he'd had a call from the War Department. Some lieutenant named Kinsman, whose job it was to sort out malicious mischief from plain old tomfoolery. 4 or 5 people have written anonymous letters to the War Department, Hannibal says, and this Lieutenant Kinsman is starting to get a little bit concerned. If it was just one fellow who had written one letter, they'd laugh it off. If it was just one fellow writing a whole bunch of letters, Kinsman says he'd call the state police up in Derry Barracks and tell them they might have a psychopath with a hate-on against the Bateman family in Ludlow. But these letters all came from different people. He said you could tell that by the handwriting, name or no name, and they all say the same crazy thing, that if Timothy Bateman is dead, he makes one hell of a lively corpse, walking up and down Peterson Road with his bare face hanging out. This Kinsman is going to send a fellow out or come himself if this don't settle down, Hannibal finishes up. They want to know if Timmy's dead or AWOL or what, because they don't like to think their records are all 6s and 7s. Also, they're going to want to know who was buried in Timmy Bateman's box if he wasn't. Well, you can see what kind of a mess it was, Louis. We sat there most of an hour, drinking iced tea and talking it over. Norma asked if we wanted sandwiches, but no one did. We talked it around, and finally we decided we had to go out there to the Bateman place. I'll never forget that night. Not if I live to be twice as old as I am now. It was hot, hotter than the hinges of hell, with the sun going down like a bucket of guts behind the clouds. There was none of us wanted to go, but we had to. Norma knew it before any of us. She got me inside on some pretext or other and said, "Don't you let them dither around and put this off, Judson. You gotta get this taken care of. It's an abomination." Judd measured Louis evenly with his eyes. That was what she called it, Lewis. It was her word. Abomination. And she kind of whispers in my ear, if anything happens, Judd, you just run. Never mind these others, they'll have to look out for themselves. You remember me and bust your hump right out of there if anything happens. We drove over in Hannibal Benson's car. That son of a bitch got all the A coupons he wanted, I don't know how. Nobody said much, but all four of us was smoking like chimblies. We were scared, Lewis. Just as scared as we could be. But the only one who really said anything was Alan Purinton. He says to George, Bill Baderman has been up to Dickens in that woods north of Route 15, and I'll put my warrant to that. Nobody answered, but I remember George nodding his head. Well, we got there, and Alan knocked, but nobody answered, so we went around to the back, and there the two of them were. Bill Baderman was sitting there on his back stoop, with a pitcher of beer, and Timmy was at the back of the yard, just staring up at that red, bloody sun as it went down. His whole face was orange with it, like he'd been flayed alive. And Bill, he looked like the devil had gotten him after his 7 years of highfalutin. He was floating in his clothes, and I judged he'd lost 40 pounds. His eyes had gone back in their sockets until they were like little animals in a pair of caves, and his mouth kept going tick, tick, tick on the left side. Judd paused, seemed to consider, and then nodded imperceptibly. Lewis, he looked damned. Timmy looked around at us and grinned. Just seeing him grin made you want to scream. Then he turned and went back to looking at the sun go down. Bill says, I didn't hear you boys knock, which was a bald-faced lie, of course, since Alan laid on that door loud enough to wake up a deaf man. No one seemed like they was going to say anything, so I says, Bill, I heard your boy was killed over in Italy. That was a mistake, he says, looking right at me. Was it? I says. You see him standing right there, don't you? He says. So who do you reckon was in that coffin you had buried out at Pleasant View? Alan Purinton asks him. Be damned if I know, Bill says. And be damned if I care. He goes to get a cigarette and spills them all over the back porch, then breaks 2 or 3 trying to pick them up. Probably have to be an exhumation, Hannibal says. You know that, don't you? I had a call from the goddamn War Department, Bill. They are going to want to know if they buried some other mother's son under Timmy's name. Well, what in the hell of it? Bill says in a loud voice. That's nothing to me, is it? I got my boy. Timmy come home the other day. He's been shell-shocked or something. He's a little strange now, but he'll come around. Let's quit this, Bill, I says. And all at once I was pretty mad at him. If and when they dig up that army coffin, they're going to find it dead empty, unless you went to the trouble of filling it up with rocks after you took your boy out of it, and I don't think you did. I know what happened. Hannibal and George and Alan here know what happened, and you know what happened too. You've been fooling around up in the woods, Bill, and you have caused yourself and this town a lot of trouble. You fellas know your way out, I guess, he says. I don't have to explain myself to you or justify myself to you or nothing. When I got that telegram, the life ran right out of me. I felt to go just like piss down the inside of my leg. Well, I got my boy back. They had no right to take my boy. He was only 17. He was all I had left of his dear mother, and it was ill-fucking legal. So fuck the Army and fuck the War Department and fuck the United States of America and fuck you boys too. I got him back. He'll come around. And that's all I gotta say. Now you all just march your boots back where you came from. And his mouth is tick, tick, ticking, and there's sweat all over his forehead in big drops, and that was when I saw he was crazy. It would have driven me crazy too, living with that thing. Lewis was feeling sick to his stomach. He had drunk too much beer too fast. Pretty soon it was all going to come up on him. The heavy, loaded feeling in his stomach told him it would be coming up soon. Well, there wasn't much else we could do. We got ready to go. Hannibal says, Bill, God help you. Bill says, God never helped me. I helped myself. That was when Timmy walked over to us. He even walked wrong, Lewis. He walked like an old, old man. He'd put one foot high up and then bring it down and then kind of shuffle and then lift the other one. It was like watching a crab walk. His hands dangled down by his legs, and when he got close enough, you could see red marks across his face on the slant, like pimples or little burns. I reckon that's where the Kraut machine gun got him. Must have damn near blowed his head off. And he stank of the grave. He was a black smell, like everything inside him was just lying there, spoiled. I saw Alan Purinton put a hand out to cover his nose and mouth. The stench was just awful. You almost expected to see grave maggots squirming around in his hair. Stop, Lewis said hoarsely. I've heard enough. You ain't, Judd said. He spoke with haggard earnestness. That's it. You ain't. And I can't even make it as bad as it was. Nobody could understand how bad it was unless they was there. He was dead, Lewis. But he was alive, too. And he knew things. Knew things? Lewis sat forward. Yeah. He looked at Alan for a long time, kind of grinning. You could see his teeth anyway. And then he spoke in this low voice. You felt like you had to strain forward to hear it. It sounded like he had gravel down in his tubes. Your wife is fucking that man she works with down at the drugstore, Purinton. What do you think of that? She screams when she comes. What do you think of that? Alan, he kind of gasped. and you could see it had hit him. Alan's in a nursing home up in Gardner now, or was the last I heard. He must be pushing 90. Back when all this happened, he was 40 or so, and there had been some talk around about his second wife. She was his second cousin, and she had come to live with Alan and Alan's first wife, Lucy, just before the war. Well, Lucy died, and a year and a half later, Alan up and married this girl. Laureen, her name was. She was no more than 24 when they married, and there had been some talk about her, you know. If you were a man, you might have called her ways sort of free and easy and let her go at that. But the women thought she might be loose. And maybe Alan had had a few thoughts in that direction too, because he says, "Shut up. Shut up or I'll knock you down. Whatever you are." "Shush now, Timmy," Bill says. And he looks worse than ever, you know, like maybe he's gonna puke or faint dead away, or do both. "You shush, Timmy." But Timmy didn't take no notice. He looks around at George Anderson, and he says, "That grandson you set such a store by is just waiting for you to die, old man. The money is all he wants. The money he thinks you got socked away in your lockbox at the Bangor Eastern Bank. That's why he makes up to you, but behind your back he makes fun of you. Him and his sister. Old wooden leg, that's what they call you," Timmy says. And Lewis, his voice, it changed. It got mean. It sounded like the way that grandson of George's would have sounded if, you know, if the things Timmy was saying was true. "Old wooden leg," Timmy says. "And won't they shit when they find out you're poor as a church mouse because you lost it all in 1938? Won't they shit, George? Won't they just shit?" George, he backed away then, and his wooden leg buckled under him, and he fell back on Bill's porch and upset his pitcher of beer. And he was as white as your undershirt, Lewis. Bill, he gets back on his feet somehow, and he's roaring at his boy, "Timmy, you stop it! You stop it!" But Timmy wouldn't. He said something bad about Hannibal, and then he said something bad about me, too. And by then he was raving, I'd say. Yeah, he was raving, all right, screaming. And we started to back away, and then we started to run, dragging George along the best we could by the arms, because he'd gotten the straps and harnesses on the fake leg twisted somehow, and it was all off to one side with the shoe turned around backward, and dragging on the grass. The last I seen of Timmy Baterman, he was on the back lawn by the clothesline, his face all red in the setting sun, those marks standing out on his face, his hair all crazy and dusty somehow. And he was laughing and screeching over and over again, "Old wooden leg, and the cuckold, and the whoremaster. Goodbye, gentlemen, goodbye, goodbye." And then he laughed,
The
but was
cuckold?
screaming really. Something inside him, screaming and screaming and screaming. Judd stopped. His chest moved up and down rapidly. "Judd," Lewis said, "the thing this Timmy Baterman told you, was it true?" "It was true," Judd muttered. "Christ, it was true. I used to go to a whorehouse in Bangor betimes. Nothing many a man hasn't done, although I suppose there are plenty that walk the straight and narrow. I just would get the urge, the compulsion maybe, to sink it into strange flesh now and then, or pay some woman to do the things a man can't bring himself to ask his wife to do. Men keep their gardens too, Lewis. It wasn't a terrible thing what I'd done, and all of that has been behind me for the last 8 or 9 years, and Norma would not have left me if she had known. But something in her would have died forever. Something dear and sweet." Judd's eyes were red and swollen and bleary. The tears of the old are singularly unlovely, Lewis thought. But when Judd groped across the table for Lewis's hand, Lewis took it firmly. "He told us only the bad," he said after a moment. "Only the bad. God knows there is enough of that in any human being's life, isn't there?" 2 or 3 days later, Laureen Purinton left Ludlow for good, and folks in town who saw her before she got on the train said she was sprouting 2 shiners and had cotton stuffed up both bores of a pump. Alan, he would never talk about it. George died in 1950, and if he left anything to that grandson and granddaughter of his, I never heard about it. Hannibal got kicked out of office because of something that was just like what Timmy Baterman accused him of. I won't tell you exactly what it was. You don't need to know. But misappropriation of town funds for his own use comes close enough to cover it, I reckon. There was even talk of trying him on embezzlement charges, but it never came to much. Losing the post was enough punishment for him anyway. His whole life was playing the big cheese. But there was good in those men, too. That's what I mean. That's what folks always find it so hard to remember. It was Hannibal got the fund started for the Eastern General Hospital right before the war. Alan Purinton was one of the most generous, open-handed men I ever knew. And old George Anderson only wanted to go on running the post office forever. It was only the bad it wanted to talk about, though. It was only the bad it wanted us to remember, because it was bad, and because it knew we meant danger for it. The Timmy Baterman that went off to fight the war was a nice, ordinary kid, Lewis, maybe a little dull but good-hearted. The thing we saw that night, looking up into that red sun, that was a monster. Maybe it was a zombie, or a Dybbuk, or a demon. Maybe there's no name for such a thing as that, but the Micmacs would have known what it was, name or no. "What?" Lewis said numbly. "Something that had been touched by the Wendigo," Judd said evenly. He took a deep breath, held it for a moment, let it out, and looked at his watch. "Well, a day. The hour's late, Lewis. I talked 9 times as much as I meant to." "I doubt that," Lewis said. "You've been very eloquent. Tell me how it came out." There was a fire at the Bateman place 2 nights later, Judd said. The house burned flat. Alan Purinton said there was no doubt about the fire being set. Range oil had been splashed from one end of that little house to the other. You could smell the reek of it for 3 days after the fire was out. So they both burned up. Oh, yeah, they burned. But they was dead beforehand. Timmy was shot twice in the chest with a pistol Bill Bateman kept handy, an old Colt's. They found it in Bill's hand. What he'd done, or so it looked like, was to kill his boy, lay him on the bed, and then spill out that range oil. Then he sat down in his easy chair by the radio, flicked a match, and ate the barrel of that Colt 45. Jesus, Lewis said. They were pretty well charred, but the county medical examiner said it looked to him like Timmy Bateman had been dead 2 or 3 weeks. Silence. Ticking out. Judd got up. I wasn't exaggerating when I said I might have killed your boy, Lewis, or had a hand in it. The Micmacs knew that place, but that doesn't necessarily mean they made it what it was. The Micmacs weren't always here. They came maybe from Canada, maybe from Russia, maybe from Asia way back in the beginning. They stayed here in Maine for 1,000 years, or maybe it was 2,000. It's hard to tell because they did not leave their mark deep on the land. And now they are gone again, same way we'll be gone someday, although I guess our mark will go deeper, for better or worse. But the place will stay, no matter who's here, Lewis. It isn't as though someone owned it and could take its secret when they moved on. It's an evil, curdled place, and I had no business taking you up there to bury that cat. I know that now. It has a power you'll beware of, if you know what's good for your family and what's good for you. I wasn't strong enough to fight it. You saved Norma's life, and I wanted to do something for you, and that place turned my good wish to its own evil purpose. It has a power, and I think that power goes through phases, same as the moon. It's been full of power before, and I'm scared it's coming around to full again. I'm scared it used me to get at you through your son. Do you see, Lewis, what I'm getting at? His eyes pleaded with Lewis. You're saying the place knew Gage was going to die, I think, Lewis said. No, I am saying the place might have made Gage die, because I introduced you to the power in the place. I am saying I may have murdered your son with good intentions, Lewis. I don't believe it, Lewis said at last, shakily. Didn't, wouldn't, couldn't. He held Judd's hand tightly. We're burying Gage tomorrow, in Bangor, and in Bangor he will stay. I don't plan to go up there to the pet cemetery or beyond it, ever again. Promise me, Judd said harshly. Promise. I promise, Lewis said. But in the back of his mind, contemplation remained, a dancing flicker of promise that would not quite go away. 40. But none of those things happened. All of them. The droning Orinco truck, the fingers that just touched the back of Gage's jumper and then slid off, Rachel preparing to go to the viewing in her housecoat, Ellie carrying Gage's picture and putting his chair next to her bed, Steve Masterton's tears, the fight with Erwin Goldman, Judd Crandall's terrible story of Timmy Baterman. All of them existed only in Lewis Creed's mind during the few seconds that passed while he raced his laughing son to the road. Behind him, Rachel screamed again. Gage, come back! Don't run! But Lewis did not waste his breath. It was going to be close, very close. And yes, one of those things really happened. From somewhere up the road he could hear the drone of the oncoming truck, and somewhere inside a memory circuit opened, and he could hear Judd Crandall speaking to Rachel on that very first day in Ludlow. You want to watch him around the road, Mrs. Creed. It's a bad road for kids and pets. Now Gage was running down the gentle slope of lawn that merged with the soft shoulder of Route 15, his husky little legs pumping, and by all the rights of the world he should have fallen over sprawling, but he just kept going. And now the sound of the truck was very loud indeed. It was that low, snoring sound that Lewis sometimes heard from his bed as he floated just beyond the rim of sleep. Then it seemed a comforting sound, but now it terrified him. Oh my dear God, oh my dear Jesus, let me catch him, don't let him get into the road. Lewis put on a final burst of speed and leaped, throwing himself out straight and parallel to the ground like a football player about to make a tackle. He could see his shadow tracking along the grass below him in the lowest periphery of his vision, and he thought of the kite, the vulture, printing its shadow all the way across Mrs. Vinton's field, and just as Gage's forward motion carried him into the road, Lewis's fingers brushed the back of his jacket, and then snagged it. He yanked Gage backward and landed on the ground at the same instant, crashing his face into the rough gravel of the shoulder, giving himself a bloody nose. His balls signaled a much more serious flash of pain. Oh, if I'd have known I was going to be playing football, I would have worn my jock. But both the pain in his nose and the driving agony in his testes were lost in the swelling relief of hearing Gage's wail of pain and outrage as his bottom landed on the shoulder and he fell over backward onto the edge of the lawn, thumping his head. A moment later, his wails were drowned by the roar of the passing truck and the almost regal blat of its air horn. Lewis managed to get up in spite of the lead ball sitting in his lower stomach and cradled his son in his arms. A moment later, Rachel joined them, also weeping, crying out to Gage. Never run in the road, Gage! Never, never, never! The road is bad! Bad! And Gage was so astonished at this tearful lecture that he left off crying and goggled up at his mother. Lewis, your nose is bleeding, she said, and then hugged him so suddenly and strongly that for a moment he could barely breathe. "That isn't the worst of it," he said. "I think I'm sterile, Rachel. Oh boy, the pain." And she laughed so hysterically that for a few moments he was frightened for her, and the thought crossed his mind, if Gage really had been killed, I believe it would have driven her crazy. But Gage was not killed. All of that had only been a hellishly detailed moment of imagination as Lewis outraced his son's death across a green lawn on a sunshiny May afternoon. Gage went to grammar school, and at the age of 7, he began going to camp, where he showed a wonderful and surprising aptitude for swimming. He also gave his parents a rather glum surprise by proving himself able to handle a month's separation with no noticeable psychic trauma. By the time he was 10, he was spending the entire summer away at Camp Agawam in Raymond, and at 11, he won 2 blue ribbons and a red one at the 4-camp swimathon that ended the summer's activities. He grew tall, and yet through it all, he was the same Gage, sweet, and rather surprised at the things the world held out. And for Gage, the fruit was somehow never bitter or rotten. He was an honor student in high school and a member of the swimming team at John Baptist, the parochial school he had insisted on attending because of its swimming facilities. Rachel was upset, but Lewis was not particularly surprised when, at 17, Gage announced his intention to convert to Catholicism. Rachel believed that all of it was because of the girl Gage was going out with. She saw marriage in his immediate future. "If that little slut with the St. Christopher's medal isn't bawling him, I'll eat your shorts, Lewis," she said. The wreckage of his college plans and his Olympic hopes, and 9 or 10 little Catholics running around by the time Gage was 40. By then he would be, according to Rachel anyway, a cigar-smoking truck driver with a beer belly, hour-fathering and Hail-Marrying his way into pre-cardiac oblivion. Lewis suspected his son's motives were rather more pure, and although Gage converted, and on the day he actually did the deed, Lewis sent an unabashedly nasty postcard to Irwin Goldman. It read, "Perhaps you'll have a Jesuit grandson yet. Your goy son-in-law, Lewis."
Your
He
goy
did not marry
son-in-law.
the rather nice and decidedly unslutty girl he had dated through most of his senior year. He went on to Johns Hopkins, made the Olympic swimming team, and on one long, dazzling, and incredibly proud afternoon, 16 years after Lewis had raced on a Rinko truck for his son's life, he and Rachel, who had now gone almost entirely gray, although she covered it with a rinse, watched their son win a gold medal for the USA. When the NBC cameras moved in for a close-up of him, standing with his dripping, seal-sleek head back, his eyes open and calm and fixed on the flag as the national anthem played, the ribbon around his neck, and the gold lying against the smooth skin of his chest, Lewis wept. He and Rachel both wept. "I guess this caps everything," he said huskily, and turned to embrace his wife. But she was looking at him with a dawning horror, her face seeming to age before his eyes, as if whipped by days and months and years of evil time. The sound of the national anthem faded, and when Lewis looked back at the TV, he saw a different boy there, a black boy with a head of tight curls in which gems of water still gleamed. "This caps everything. His cap. His cap is... Oh, dear God, his cap is full of blood." Lewis woke up in the cold dead light of a rainy 7 o'clock, clutching his pillow in his arms. His head thumped monstrously with his heartbeat. The ache swelled and faded. Swelled and faded. He burped acid that tasted like old beer, and his stomach heaved miserably. He had been weeping. The pillow was wet with his tears, as if he had somehow stumbled in and then out of one of those hokey country and western laments in his sleep. Even in the dream, he thought, some part of him had known the truth, and had cried for it. He got up and stumbled to the bathroom, heart racing threadily in his chest, consciousness itself fragmented by the fierceness of his hangover. He reached the toilet bowl barely in time, and threw up a glut of last night's beer. He kneeled on the floor, eyes closed, until he felt capable of actually making it to his feet. He groped for the handle and flushed the John. He went to the mirror to see how badly bloodshot his eyes were, but the glass had been covered with a square of sheeting. Then he recalled. Drawing almost randomly on a past she professed to barely remember, Rachel had covered all the mirrors in the house, and she took off her shoes before entering through the door. No Olympic swimming team, Lewis thought dully as he walked back to his bed and sat down on it. The sour taste of beer coated his mouth and throat, and he swore to himself, not for the first time or the last, that he would never touch that poison again. No Olympic swimming team, no 3.0 in college, no little Catholic girlfriend or conversion, no Camp Agawam, no nothing. His sneakers had been torn off, his jumper turned inside out, his sweet little boy's body, so tough and sturdy, nearly dismembered. His cap had been full of blood. Now, sitting on his bed in the grip of this numbing hangover, rainwater spilling its lazy courses down the window beside him, his grief came for him fully, like some grey matron from Ward 9 in Purgatory. It came and dissolved him, unmanned him, took away whatever defenses remained, and he put his face in his hands and cried, rocking back and forth on his bed, thinking he would do anything to have a second chance. Anything at all. 41. Gage was buried at 2 o'clock that afternoon. By then the rain had stopped. Tattered clouds still moved overhead, and most of the mourners arrived carrying black umbrellas provided by the undertaker. At Rachel's request, the funeral director, who officiated at the short, non-sectarian graveside service, read the passage from Matthew which begins, "Suffer the little children to come unto me." Lewis, standing on one side of the grave, looked across at his father-in-law. For a moment, Goldman looked back at him, and then he dropped his eyes. There was no fight left in him today. The pouches under his eyes now resembled mailbags, and around his black silk skullcap, hair as fine and white as tattered spider webs flew randomly in the breeze. With his grayish-black beard scragging his cheeks, he looked more like a wino than ever. He gave Lewis the impression of a man who did not really know where he was. Lewis tried, but could still find no pity in his heart for him. Gage's small white coffin, its latch presumably repaired, sat on a pair of chromed runners over the grave liner. The verges of the grave had been carpeted with astroturf so violently green it hurt Lewis's eyes. Several baskets of flowers had been set on top of this artificial and strangely gay surface. Lewis's eyes looked over the funeral director's shoulder. Here was a low hill, covered with graves, family plots, one Romanesque monument with the name Phipps engraved on it. Just above the sloping roof of Phipps, he could see a sliver of yellow. Lewis looked at this, pondering it. He continued to look at it, even after the funeral director said, "Let us bow our heads for a moment of silent prayer." It took Lewis a few minutes, but he got it. It was a payloader parked over the hill where the mourners wouldn't have to look at it. And when the funeral was over, Oz would crush his cigarette on the heel of his towable work boot, put it in whatever container he carried around with him. In a cemetery, sextons caught depositing their butts on the ground were almost always summarily fired. It looked bad. Too many of the clientele had died of lung cancer. Jump in the payloader, fire that sucker up, and cut his son off from the sun, forever. Or at least until the day of the resurrection. Resurrection. Ah, there's a word. That you should put right the fuck out of your mind, and you know it. When the funeral director said amen, Lewis took Rachel's arm and guided her away. Rachel murmured some protest. She wanted to stay a bit longer, please, Lewis. But Lewis was firm. They approached the cars. He saw the funeral director taking umbrellas, with the home's name discreetly printed on the handles, from the mourners who passed and handing them to an assistant. The assistant put them in an umbrella stand which looked surreal, standing there on the dewy turf. He held Rachel's arm with his right hand and Ellie's white-gloved hand with his left. Ellie was wearing the same dress she had worn to Norma Crandall's funeral. Judd came over as Lewis handed his ladies into the car. Judd also looked as if he'd had a hard night. "You okay, Lewis?" Lewis nodded. Judd bent to look into the car. "How are you, Rachel?" he asked. "I'm all right, Judd," she whispered. Judd touched her shoulder gently and then looked at Ellie. "How about you, dear one?" "I'm fine," Ellie said, and produced a hideous smile of shark-like proportions to show him how fine she was. "What's that picture you got there?" For a moment Lewis thought she would hold it, refused to show him, and then with a painful shyness she passed it to Judd. He held it in his big fingers that were so splayed and somehow clumsy-looking, fingers that looked fit mostly for grappling with the transmissions of big road machines, or making couplings on the B&M line. But they were also the fingers that had pulled a bee-stinger from Gage's neck with all the offhand skill of a magician or a surgeon. "Why, that's real nice," Judd said. "You pulling him on a sled? Bet he liked that, didn't he, Ellie?" Beginning to weep, Ellie nodded. Rachel began to say something, but Lewis squeezed her arm. "Be still a while." "I used to pull him a lot," Ellie said, weeping. "And he'd laugh and laugh. Then we'd go in and Mommy would fix us cocoa and say, 'Put your boots away.' And Gage would grab them all up and scream, 'Boots, boots,' so loud it hurt your ears. Remember that, Mom?" Rachel nodded. I bet that was a good time, all right," Judd said, handing the picture back. "And he may be dead now, Ellie, but you can keep your memories of him." "I'm going to," she said, wiping at her face. "I loved Gage, Mr. Crandall." "I know you did, dear." He leaned in and kissed her, and when he withdrew, his eyes swept Lewis and Rachel stonily. Rachel
Excuse me.
met his gaze, puzzled and a little hurt, not understanding, but Lewis understood well enough. "What are you doing for her?" Judd's eyes asked. "Your son is dead, but your daughter is not. What are you doing for her?" Lewis looked away. There was nothing he could do for her, not yet. She would have to swim in her grief as best she could. His thoughts were too full of his son. 42. By evening, a fresh rack of clouds had come in and a strong west wind had begun to blow. Lewis put on his light jacket, zipped it up, and took the civic keys from the peg on the wall. "Where are you going, Lou?" Rachel asked. She spoke without much interest. After supper, she had begun crying again, and although her weeping was gentle, she had seemed incapable of stopping. Lewis had forced her to take a Valium. Now she sat with the paper folded open to the barely started crossword puzzle. In the other room, Ellie sat silently watching Little House on the Prairie with Gage's picture on her lap. "I thought I'd pick up a pizza." "Didn't you get enough to eat earlier?" "I just didn't seem hungry then," he said, telling the truth and then adding a lie. "I am now." That afternoon, between 3 and 6, the final rite of Gage's funeral had taken place at the Ludlow house. This was the rite of food. Steve Masterton and his wife had come with a hamburger and noodle casserole. Charlton had appeared with a quiche. "It will keep until you want it if it doesn't all get eaten," she told Rachel. "Quiche is easy to warm up." The Danekers from up the road brought a baked ham. The Goldmans appeared. Neither of them would speak to Lewis or even come close to him, for which he was not sorry, with a variety of cold cuts and cheeses. Judd also brought cheese, a large wheel of his old favorite, Mr. Rat. Missy Dandridge brought a key lime pie, and Surendra Hardu brought apples. The right of food apparently transcended religious differences. This was the funeral party, and although it was quiet, it was not quite subdued. There was rather less drinking than at an ordinary party, but there was some. After a few beers, only the night before he had sworn he would never touch the stuff again, but in the cold afternoon light the previous evening it seemed impossibly long ago. Lewis thought to pass on a few little funerary anecdotes his Uncle Carl had told him. That at Sicilian funerals, unmarried women sometimes snipped a piece of the deceased's shroud and slept with it under their pillows, believing it would bring them luck and love. That at Irish funerals, mock weddings were sometimes performed, and the toes of the dead were tied together because of an ancient Celtic belief that it kept the deceased's ghost from walking. Uncle Carl said that the custom of tying DOA tags to the great toes of corpses had begun in New York, and since all of the early morgue keepers had been Irish, he believed this to be a survival of that old superstition. Then, looking at their faces, he had decided such tales would be taken wrong. Rachel had broken down only once, and her mother was there to comfort her. Rachel clung to Dory Goldman and sobbed against her shoulder in an open, let-it-all-go way that had been so far impossible for her with Lewis, perhaps because she saw them both as culpable in Gage's death, or perhaps because Lewis, lost in the peculiar half-world of his own fancies, had not encouraged her grief. Either way, she had turned to her mother for comfort, and Dory was there to give it, mingling her tears with her daughter's. Erwin Goldman stood behind them, his hand on Rachel's shoulder, and looked with sickly triumph across the room at Lewis. Ellie circulated with a silver tray loaded with canapes, little rolls with a feathered toothpick poked through each one. Her picture of Gage was tucked firmly under her arm. Lewis received condolences. He nodded and thanked the condolers, and if his eyes seemed distant, his manner a little cold, people supposed he was thinking of the past, of the accident, of the Gageless life ahead. None, perhaps not even Judd, would have suspected that Lewis had begun to think about the strategies of grave robbing. Only in an academic way, of course. It was not that he intended to do anything. It was only a way to keep his mind occupied. It was not as if he intended to do anything. Lewis stopped at the Orrington corner store, bought 2 six-packs of cold beer, and called ahead to Napoli's for a pepperoni and mushroom pizza. Want to give me a name on that, sir? Oz the Great and Terrible, Lewis thought. Lou Creed. Okay, Lou, we're real busy, so it'll maybe be 45 minutes. That okay for you? Sure, Lewis said and hung up. As he got back into the Civic and keyed the engine, it occurred to him that although there were maybe 20 pizza joints in the Bangor area, he had picked the one closest to Pleasant View, where Gage was buried. Well, what the hell? He thought uneasily. They make good pizza. No frozen dough. Throw it up and catch it on their fists, right there where you can watch. And Gage used to laugh. He cut that thought off. He drove past Napoli's to Pleasant View. He supposed he had known that he would do that. But what harm? None. He parked across the street and crossed the road to the wrought iron gates, which glimmered in the final light of day. Above them, in a semicircle, were wrought iron letters spelling Pleasant View. The view was, in Lewis's mind, neither pleasant nor unpleasant. The cemetery was nicely landscaped on several rolling hills. There were long aisles of trees. Ah, but in these last few minutes of fading daylight, the shadows those trees threw seemed deeply pooled and as blackly unpleasant as still quarry water, and a few isolated weeping willows. It wasn't quiet. The turnpike was near. The drone of traffic came on the steady, chill wind, and the glow in the darkening sky was Bangor International Airport. He stretched his hand out to the gate, thinking, they'll be locked. But they were not. Perhaps it was too early to lock them, and if they locked them at all, it would only be to protect the place against drunks, vandals, and teenage neckers. The days of the Dickensian resurrection men, there's that word again, were over. The right-hand gate swung in with a faint screeing noise, and after a glance over his shoulder to make sure he was unobserved, Lewis stepped through. He closed the gate behind him and heard the click of the latch. He stood in this modest suburb of the dead, looking around. A fine and private place, he thought, but none, I think, do there embrace. Who? Andrew Marvell? And why did the human mind store up such amazing middens of useless junk, anyway? Judd's voice spoke up in his mind then, worried and frightened. Yes, frightened. Lewis, what are you doing here? You're looking up a road you don't want to travel. He pushed the voice aside. If he was torturing anyone, it was only himself. No one need know he had been here as the daylight wound down to the dark. He began to walk toward Gage's grave, taking one of the winding paths. In a moment he was in a lane of trees. They rustled their new leaves mysteriously over his head. His heart was thudding too loudly in his chest. The graves and monuments were in rough rows. Somewhere there would be a caretaker's building, and in it would be a map of Pleasant View's 20 or so acres, neatly and sanely divided into quadrants, each quadrant showing the occupied graves and the unsold plots. Real estate for sale. One-room apartments. Sleepers. Not much like the pet cemetery, he thought, and this caused him to stop and consider for a moment, surprised. No, it wasn't. The pet cemetery had given him an impression of order rising almost unknown out of chaos. Those rough concentric circles moving inward to the center, rude slates, crosses made out of boards, as if the children who buried their pets there had created the pattern out of their own collective unconsciousness. As if, for a moment, Lewis saw the pet cemetery as a kind of advertisement. A come-on, like the kind they give you on Free Galley at the carnival. They'd bring out the fire eater and you got to watch his show for free, because the owners knew you wouldn't buy the steak unless you saw the sizzle. You wouldn't cough up the cash if you didn't see the flash. Those graves in their almost druidic circles. The graves in the pet cemetery mimed the most ancient religious symbol of all, diminishing circles indicating a spiral leading down, not to a point, but to infinity. Order from chaos or chaos from order, depending on which way your mind worked. It was a symbol the Egyptians had chiseled on the tombs of the pharaohs, a symbol the Phoenicians had drawn on the barrows of their fallen kings. It was found on cave walls in ancient Mycenae. The guild kings of Stonehenge had created it as a clock to time the universe. It appeared in the Judeo-Christian Bible as the whirlwind from which God had spoken to Job. The spiral was the oldest sign of power in the world, man's oldest symbol of that twisty bridge which may exist between the world and the gulf. Lewis reached Gage's grave at last. The payloader was gone. The AstroTurf had been removed, rolled up by some whistling workman with his mind on an after-work beer at the Fairmont Lounge, stored in an equipment shed somewhere. Where Gage lay, there was a neat rectangle of bare, raked earth, perhaps 5 feet by 3 feet. The headstone had not been set up yet. Lewis kneeled. The wind blew through his hair, tumbling it. The sky was almost entirely dark now. It raced with clouds. No one has shown a light in my face and asked me what I'm doing here. No watchdog has barked. The gate was unlocked. The days of the resurrection men are past. If I came up here with a pick and a shovel, he came back to himself with a jerk. He was only playing a dangerous mind game with himself if he pretended that Pleasant View stood unwatched during the night hours. Suppose he was discovered, belly deep in his son's new grave by the caretaker or the watchman. It might not get into the papers, but then again, he might be charged with a crime. What crime? Grave robbing? Unlikely. Malicious mischief or vandalism would be more likely. And in the paper or out of it, the word would get around. People would talk. It was a story too juicy not to be told. Local doctor is discovered digging up his 2-year-old son, recently killed in a tragic road accident. He would lose his job. Even if not, Rachel would be chilled by the wind of such tales, and Ellie might be harried by them at school until her life was a misery of chanting children. There might be the humiliation of a sanity test in exchange for dropping charges. But I could bring Gage back to life. Gage could live again. Did he really, actually, believe that? The fact was that he did. He had told himself time and time again, both before Gage's death and after it, that Church had not really been dead, only stunned. That Church had dug his way out and come home. A kiddie story with gruesome undertones. Winnie the Pooh. Master unwittingly piles a cairn of stones over a living animal. Faithful beast digs itself out and comes home. Fine. Except it was not true. Church had been dead. The Micmac burying ground had brought it back to life. He sat by Gage's grave, trying to place all the known components in an order, as rational and logical as this dark magic would allow. Timmy Baterman now. First, did he believe the story? And second, did it make a difference? In spite of its convenience, he believed most of it. It was undeniable that if a place like the Micmac burying ground existed, as it did, and if people knew of it, as a few of the older Ludlowites did, then sooner or later someone would try the experiment. Human nature as Lewis understood it made it more difficult to believe that it had stopped at a few pets and valuable breed animals. All right then, did he also believe that Timmy Baterman had been transformed into some sort of all-knowing demon? That was a more difficult question, and he was wary of it because he didn't want to believe it, and he had seen the results of that sort of mindset before. No, he did not want to believe Timmy Baterman had been a demon, but he would not, absolutely could not, allow himself to let what he wanted cloud his judgment. Lewis thought about Hanratty, the bull. Hanratty, Judd said, had turned mean. So in his way had Timmy Baterman. Hanratty had later been put down by the same man who had somehow dragged the bull's body up to the Micmac burying ground on a sledge. Timmy Baterman had been put down by his father. But because Hanratty had gone bad, did that mean that all animals went bad? No. Hanratty the bull did not prove the general case. Hanratty was in fact an exception to the general case. Look back at the other animals. Judd's dog Spot, the old woman's parakeet, Church himself. They had all come back changed, and the change had been noticeable in all cases, but in the case of Spot, at least, the change hadn't been so great that Judd had forborne to recommend the process of resurrection. Yes, of resurrection, to a friend years later. Of course, farther down the line, he had tried to justify and hem and haw, and had spouted a lot of ominous, confused bullshit that could not even rightly be called philosophy. How could he refuse to take the chance available to him? This one, unbelievable chance, on the basis of the Timmy Baterman story. One swallow did not a summer make. You're slanting all the evidence in favor of the conclusion you want to produce, his mind protested. At least tell yourself the goddamn truth about the change in Church. Even if you want to disqualify the animals, the mice and the birds. What about the way he is? Muddled. That's the best word of all. That sums it up. The day we were out with the kite. You remember how Gage was that day? How vibrant and alive he was, reacting to everything? Wouldn't it be better to remember him that way? Do you want to resurrect a zombie from a grade B horror picture? Or even something so prosaic as a retarded little boy? A boy who eats with his fingers and stares blankly at images on the TV screen? And who will never learn to write his own name? What did Judd say about his dog? It was like washing a piece of meat. Is that what you want? a piece of breathing meat? And even if you're able to be satisfied with that, how do you explain the return of your son from the dead to your wife, to your daughter, to Steve Masterton, to the world? What happens the first time Missy Dandridge pulls into the driveway and sees Gage riding his trike in the yard? Can't you hear her screams, Lewis? Can't you see her harrowing her face with her fingernails? What do you say to the reporters? What do you say when a film crew from Real People turns up on your doorstep, wanting to shoot film of your resurrected son? Did any of this really matter, or was it only the voice of cowardice? Did he believe these things could not be dealt with? That Rachel would greet her dead son with anything but tears of joy? Yes, he supposed there was a real possibility that Gage might return, well, diminished. But would that change the quality of his love? Parents loved children who were born blind, children born as Siamese twins, children who were born with their guts abysmally rearranged. Parents pled for judicial mercy or executive clemency on behalf of children who had grown up to commit rape and murder and the torture of the innocent. Did he believe it would be impossible for him to love Gage, even if Gage had to go on wearing diapers until he was 8? If he did not master the first grade primer until he was 12? If he never mastered it at all? Could he simply dismiss his son as a sort of divine abortion when there was another recourse? But Lewis, my God, you don't live in a vacuum. People will say, he cut that thought off with rude, angry force. Of all the things not to consider now, public notice was probably the greatest of them. Lewis glanced down at the raked dirt of Gage's grave and felt a wave of awe and horror course through him. Unknowing, moving by themselves, his fingers had drawn a pattern in the dirt. He had drawn a spiral. He swept the fingers of both hands through the dirt, rubbing the pattern out. Then he left Pleasantview, hurrying, feeling very much a trespasser now, believing that he would be seen, stopped, questioned at every turn of the path. He was late collecting his pizza, and although it had been left on top of one of the big ovens, it was semi-cold and greasy, and every bit as tasty as cooked clay. Lewis ate one piece and then tossed the rest out the window, box and all, as he headed back to Ludlow. He wasn't a litter bug by nature, but he did not want Rachel to see a mostly uneaten pizza at home in the wastebasket. It might raise a surmise in her mind that a pizza wasn't really what he'd had in mind when he went to Bangor. Lewis now began to think about the time and circumstance. Time. Time might be of extreme, even crucial importance. Timmy Baterman had been dead a good while before his father could get him up to the Micmac burying ground.
Timmy was shot the 19th. Timmy was buried. Don't hold me to this, but I think it was on July 22nd. It was 4 or 5 days later that Marjorie Washburn saw Timmy walking up the road.
All right. Say that Bill Baterman had done it 4 days after his son's original interral. No. If he was going to err, let him err on the side of conservatism. Say 3 days. For the sake of argument, assume that Timmy Baterman returned from the dead on July 25th. That made 6 days between the boy's death and his return, and that was a conservative estimate. It might have been as long as 10 days. For Gage, it had now been 4 days. Time had already gotten away from him to a degree, but it was still possible to cut Bill Baterman's best time considerably, if he could bring about circumstances similar to those which had made the resurrection of Church possible. Because Church had died at the best possible time, hadn't he? His family had been away when Church was struck and killed. No one was the wiser except for him and Judd. His family had been in Chicago. For Lewis, the final piece fell into place with a neat little click. You want us to what? Rachel asked, staring at him, astounded. It was 10:15. Ellie had gone to bed. Rachel had taken another Valium after cleaning up the detritus of the funeral party. Funeral party was another of those horrible phrases full of unstated paradox, like visiting hours, but there seemed no other phrase for the way they had spent their afternoon, and had seemed dazed and quiet ever since he returned from Bangor, but this had gotten through. To go back to Chicago with your mother and father, Lewis repeated patiently. They'll be going tomorrow. If you call them now in Delta right after, you may be able to get on the same plane with them. Lewis, have you lost your mind? After the fight you had with my father? Lewis found himself speaking with a quick glibness that was totally unlike him. It afforded him a cheesy sort of exhilaration. He felt like a football sub who suddenly gets the ball and makes a 70-yard touchdown run, cutting and weaving, outthinking potential tacklers with a delirious, one-time-only ease. He had never been a particularly good liar, and he had not planned this encounter in any detail at all, but now a string of plausible lies, half-truths, and inspired justification poured out of him. The fight we had is one of the reasons I want you and Ellie to go back with them. It's time we sewed up this wound, Rachel. I knew that, felt it, at the funeral parlor. When the fight started, I was trying to patch things up. But this trip? I don't think it's a good idea at all, Lewis. We need you. And you need us. Her eyes measured him doubtfully. At least I hope you need us. And neither of us are in any kind of shape to stay here, Lewis said forcefully. He felt as if he might be coming down with a fever. I'm glad you need me, and I do need you and Ellie. But right now, this is the worst damn place in the world for you, honey. Gage is everywhere in this house, around every corner. For you and me, sure, but it's even worse for Ellie, I think. He saw pain flicker in her eyes and knew he had touched her. Some part of himself felt shame at this cheap victory. All the textbooks he'd read on the subject of death told him that the bereaved's first strong impulse is to get away from the place where it happened, and that to succumb to such an impulse may turn out to be the most harmful course of action, because it allows the bereaved the dubious luxury of refusing to come to terms with the new reality. The book said it was best to remain where you were, to battle grief on its home ground until it subsided into remembrance. But Lewis simply did not dare make the experiment with his family at home. He had to get rid of them. at least for a while. I know, she said. It just hits you all over the place.
I'll be right back. I'm gonna bio break real quick. I'll probably listen to this a little bit more. We'll see. I mean, I'm near the end, so, but I'll be right back. I'm gonna go to Donkey Kong.
You choose her or not choose wrong. With a stiffer heart, she's one cool calm. Her DK, Donkey Kong. He has no style, he has no grace. This Kong has a funny face. He can handstand when he needs to and stretch his arms out just for you. Inflate himself just like a balloon. This crazy Kong just digs his tune. DK, Donkey Kong. DK, Donkey Kong. DK, Donkey Kong is here. He's back again and about time too. And this time, he's in the mood. He can fly real high with his jetpack on. With his pistols out, he's one tough Kong. He'll make you smile when he plays his tune. But gremlins beware, cause he's after you. DK, Donkey Kong. Finally, he's here for you. It's the last member of the DK crew. This Kong's so strong, it isn't funny. Can make a gremlin cry out for mommy. Can pick up a boulder with relative ease. Makes crushing rocks seem such a breeze. He may move slow, he can't jump high, but this Kong's one hell of a guy. Come on, Cranky, take it to the fridge. Walnuts, peanuts, pineapple smells. Grapes, melons, oranges, and coconut shells. Oh yeah, walnuts, peanuts, pineapple smells. Grapes, melons, oranges, and coconut shells. Oh yeah, walnuts, peanuts, pineapple smells. Grapes, melons, oranges, and coconut shells. Oh yeah, walnuts, peanuts, pineapple smells. Grapes, melons, oranges, and coconut shells. Oh yeah, walnuts, peanuts, pineapple smells. Grapes, melons, oranges, and coconut shells. Oh yeah, walnuts, peanuts, pineapple smells. Grapes, melons, oranges, and coconut shells. Oh yeah, walnuts, peanuts, pineapple smells. Grapes, melons, oranges, and coconut shells. Oh yeah, walnuts, peanuts, pineapple smells. Grapes, melons, oranges, and coconut shells. Oh yeah, walnuts, peanuts, pineapple smells. Grapes, melons, oranges, and coconut shells. Oh yeah, walnuts, peanuts, pineapple smells. Grapes, melons, oranges, and coconut shells. Oh yeah, walnuts, peanuts, pineapple smells. Grapes, melons, oranges, and coconut shells. Oh yeah, walnuts, peanuts, pineapple smells. Grapes, melons, oranges, and coconut shells. Oh yeah, walnuts, peanuts, pineapple smells. Grapes, melons, oranges, and coconut shells. Oh yeah, walnuts, peanuts, pineapple smells. Grapes, melons, oranges, and coconut shells. Oh yeah, walnuts, peanuts, pineapple smells. Grapes, melons, oranges, and coconut shells. Oh yeah, walnuts, peanuts, pineapple smells. Grapes, melons, oranges, and coconut shells. Oh yeah, walnuts, peanuts, pineapple smells. Grapes, melons, oranges, and coconut shells. Oh yeah, walnuts, peanuts, pineapple smells. Grapes, melons, oranges, and coconut shells. Oh yeah, walnuts, peanuts, pineapple smells. Grapes, melons, oranges, and coconut shells. You choose her or not choose wrong. With a skipper heart, she's one cool, calm, DK, Donkey Kong. He has no style, he has no grace. This Kong has a funny face. He can handstand when he needs to and stretch his arms out just for you. Inflate himself just like a balloon. This crazy Kong just digs his tune. DK, Donkey Kong. DK, Donkey Kong. DK, Donkey Kong is here. He's back again and about time too. And this time, he's in the mood. He can fly real high with his jetpack on. With his pistols out, he's one tough Kong. He'll make you smile when he plays his tune. But gremlins beware, cause he's after you. DK, Donkey Kong. Finally, he's here for you. It's the last member of the DK crew. This Kong's so strong, it isn't funny. Can make a gremlin cry out for mommy. Can pick up a boulder with relative ease. Makes crushing rocks seem such a breeze. He may move slow, he can't jump high, but this Kong's one hell of a guy. Come on, Cranky, take it to the fridge. Walnuts, peanuts, pineapple smells, grapes, melons, oranges, and coconut shells. Oh yeah, walnuts, peanuts, pineapple smells, grapes, melons, oranges, and coconut shells. Oh yeah, walnuts, peanuts, pineapple smells, grapes, melons, oranges, and coconut shells. Oh yeah, walnuts, peanuts, pineapple smells, grapes, melons, oranges, and coconut shells. Oh yeah, walnuts, peanuts, pineapple smells, grapes, melons, oranges, and coconut shells. Oh yeah, walnuts, peanuts, pineapple smells, grapes, melons, oranges, and coconut shells. Oh yeah, walnuts, peanuts, pineapple smells, grapes, melons, oranges, and coconut shells. Oh yeah, walnuts, peanuts, pineapple smells, grapes, melons, oranges, and coconut shells. Oh yeah, walnuts, peanuts, pineapple smells, grapes, melons, oranges, and coconut shells. Oh yeah, walnuts, peanuts, pineapple smells, grapes, melons, oranges, and coconut shells. Oh yeah, walnuts, peanuts, pineapple smells, grapes, melons, oranges, and coconut shells. Oh yeah, walnuts, peanuts, pineapple smells, grapes, melons, oranges, and coconut shells. Oh yeah, walnuts, peanuts, pineapple smells, grapes, melons, oranges, and coconut shells. Oh yeah, walnuts, peanuts, pineapple smells, grapes, melons, oranges, and coconut shells. Oh yeah, walnuts, peanuts, pineapple smells, grapes, melons, oranges, and coconut shells. Oh yeah, walnuts, peanuts, pineapple smells, grapes, melons, oranges, and coconut shells. Oh yeah, walnuts, peanuts, pineapple smells, grapes, melons, oranges, and coconut shells. Oh yeah, walnuts, peanuts, pineapple smells, grapes, melons, oranges, and coconut shells. Oh yeah, walnuts, peanuts, pineapple smells, grapes, melons, oranges, and coconut shells. You choose her or not choose wrong. With a skipper heart, she's one cool, calm, DK, Donkey Kong. He has no style, he has no grace. This Kong has a funny face. He can handstand when he needs to and stretch his arms out just for you. inflate himself just like a balloon. This crazy Kong just digs his tune. DK, Donkey Kong. DK, Donkey Kong. DK, Donkey Kong is here. He's back again and about time too. And this time, he's in the mood. He can fly real high with his jetpack on, with his pistols out. He's one tough Kong. He'll make you smile when he plays his tune. But gremlins beware, cause he's after you. DK, Donkey Kong. Finally, he's here for you. It's the last member of the DK crew. This Kong's so strong, it isn't funny. Can make a gremlin cry out for mommy. Can pick up a boulder with relative ease. Makes crushing rocks see such a breeze. He may move slow, he can't jump high, but this Kong's one hell of a guy. Come on, Cranky, take it to the fridge. Walnuts, peanuts, pineapple smells, grapes, melons, oranges, and coconut shells. Oh yeah, walnuts, peanuts, pineapple smells, grapes, melons, oranges, and coconut shells. Oh yeah, walnuts, peanuts, pineapple smells, grapes, melons, oranges, and coconut shells. Oh yeah, walnuts, peanuts, pineapple smells, grapes, melons, oranges, and coconut shells. Oh yeah, walnuts, peanuts, pineapple smells, grapes, melons, oranges, and coconut shells. Oh yeah, walnuts, peanuts, pineapple smells, grapes, melons, oranges, and coconut shells. Oh yeah, walnuts, peanuts, pineapple smells, grapes, melons, oranges, and coconut shells. Oh yeah, walnuts, peanuts, pineapple smells, grapes, melons, oranges, and coconut shells. Oh yeah, walnuts, peanuts, pineapple smells, grapes, melons, oranges, and coconut shells. Oh yeah, walnuts, peanuts, pineapple smells, grapes, melons, oranges, and coconut shells. Oh yeah, walnuts, peanuts, pineapple smells, grapes, melons, oranges, and coconut shells. Oh yeah, walnuts, peanuts, pineapple smells, grapes, melons, oranges, and coconut shells. Oh yeah, walnuts, peanuts, pineapple smells, grapes, melons, oranges, and coconut shells. Oh yeah, walnuts, peanuts, pineapple smells, grapes, melons, oranges, and coconut shells. Oh yeah, walnuts, peanuts, pineapple smells, grapes, melons, oranges, and coconut shells. Oh yeah, walnuts, peanuts, pineapple smells, grapes, melons, oranges, and coconut shells. Oh yeah, walnuts, peanuts, pineapple smells, grapes, melons, oranges, and coconut shells. Oh yeah, walnuts, peanuts, pineapple smells, grapes, melons, oranges, and coconut shells. Oh yeah, walnuts, peanuts, pineapple smells, grapes, melons, oranges, and coconut shells. You choose her or not choose wrong. With a skipper heart, she's one cool Kong. DK, Donkey Kong. He has no style, he has no grace. This Kong has a funny face. He can handstand when he needs to, and stretch his arms out just for you. Inflate himself just like a balloon. This crazy Kong just digs his tune. DK, Donkey Kong. DK, Donkey Kong. DK, Donkey Kong is here. He's back again and about time too. And this time, he's in the mood. He can fly real high with his jetpack on, with his pistols out. He's one tough con. He'll make you smile when he plays his tune. But gremlins beware, cause he's after you. DK, Donkey Kong. Finally, he's here for you. It's the last member of the DK crew. This Kong's so strong, it isn't funny. Can make a gremlin cry out for mommy. Can pick up a boulder with relative ease. Makes crushing rocks seem such a breeze. He may move slow, he can't jump high, but this Kong's one hell of a guy. Come on, Cranky, take it to the fridge. Walnuts, peanuts, pineapple smells. Grapes, melons, oranges, and coconut shells. Oh yeah, walnuts, peanuts, pineapple smells. Grapes, melons, oranges, and coconut shells. Oh yeah, walnuts, peanuts, pineapple smells. Grapes, melons, oranges, and coconut shells. Oh yeah, walnuts, peanuts, pineapple smells. Grapes, melons, oranges, and coconut shells. Oh yeah, walnuts, peanuts, pineapple smells. Grapes, melons, oranges, and coconut shells. Oh yeah, walnuts, peanuts, pineapple smells. Grapes, melons, oranges, and coconut shells. Oh yeah, walnuts, peanuts, pineapple smells. Grapes, melons, oranges, and...
I'm back. Hello. Coffee McCofferson. I guess let's continue this wonderful story of depression and grief.
I moved the couch while you were in Bangor. I thought running the vacuum around would take my mind off things. And I found 4 of his little Matchbox cars under there, as if they were waiting for him to come back and, play with them. Her voice, already wavering, now broke. Tears spilled down her cheeks. And that's when I took the second Valium because I started crying again, the way I'm crying now. Oh, what a fucking soap opera all of this is. Hold me, Lou. Will you hold me? He did hold her, and he did it well, but he felt like an imposter. His mind spun with ways to turn these tears to his further benefit. Some nice guy, all right. Hey-ho, let's go. How long does it go on? She wept. Does it ever end? If only we could have him back, Louis. I swear I'd watch him better. It would never happen. And just because that driver was going too fast, that doesn't let us, off the hook. I didn't know there could ever be hurt like this, and that's the truth. It comes over and over. It comes, and it hurts so much, Louis. There's no rest from it, even when I go to sleep. When I go to sleep, I dream it over and over again. I see him running to the road, and I scream to him. Shh, he said. Rachel, shh. She lifted her puffy face to him. It wasn't even as if he were being bad, Louis. It was just a game to him. The truck came along at the wrong time, and Missy Dandridge called while I was still crying. And she said she read in the Ellsworth American that the driver tried to kill himself. What? He tried to hang himself in his garage. He's in shock and deep depression, the paper said. Too fucking bad he didn't make good on it, Louis said savagely. But his voice sounded distant to his own ears, and he felt a chill spreading through. The place has a power, Louis. It's been full of power before, and I'm scared it's coming around full again. My boy's dead, and he's out on $1,000 bail. And he'll go on feeling depressed and suicidal until some judge takes away his license for 90 days and gives him a slap on the wrist fine. Missy says his wife has taken the kids and left him, Rachel said dully. She didn't get that from the paper, but from somebody who knows somebody down Ellsworth Way. He wasn't drunk. He wasn't on drugs. He didn't have any previous speeding violations. He said that when he got to Ludlow, he just felt like putting the pedal to the metal. He said he didn't even know why. So around and around it goes. He just felt like putting the pedal to the metal. The place has a power. Louis thrust those thoughts away. He gripped his wife's forearm gently. Call your mother and father. Do it now. There's no need for you and Ellie to be in this house another day. Not another day. Not without you, she said. Louis, I need us to stick together. I'll follow you in 3 days, 4 at the most. If things went well, Rachel and Ellie might be back here in 48 hours. I've got to find someone to fill in for me on a part-time basis, at least, at the university. I've got sick time and vacation time coming, but I don't want to leave Surrendra on the hot seat. Judd can watch the house while we're gone, but I want to cut off the electricity and store what we've got in the Dandridge's deep freeze. Ellie's school. The hell with it. It's out in 3 weeks anyway. They'll understand the circumstances being what they are. They'll arrange an early dismissal. It'll all work just... Louis? He broke off. What? What are you hiding? Hiding? He looked at her openly, clearly. I don't know what you're talking about. Don't you? No, I don't. Never mind. I'll call them right now, if that's what you really want. It is, he said, and the words seemed to echo in his mind with an iron clang. It might even be best for Ellie. She looked at him with her red-rimmed eyes, still slightly glazed from Valium. You look feverish, Lewis, as if you might be coming down with something. She went to the telephone and called the motel where her parents were staying before Lewis could reply. The Goldmans were overjoyed at Rachel's proposal. They were not so wild about the idea of Lewis joining them in 3 or 4 days, but in the end they wouldn't have to worry about it all, of course. Lewis had not the slightest intention of going to Chicago. He had suspected that if there was to be a snag, it would be getting air reservations this late. But luck was with him there too. There were still available seats on Delta's Bangor to Cincinnati run, and a quick check showed 2 cancellations on a Cincinnati to Chicago flight. It meant that Rachel and Ellie would be able to travel with the Goldmans only as far as Cincinnati, but they would get to Chicago less than an hour after. It's almost like magic, Lewis thought, hanging up the telephone, and Judd's voice responded promptly. It's been full of power before, and I'm scared. Oh, get fucked, he told Judd's voice rudely. I've learned to accept a great many strange things in the last 10 months, my good old friend. But am I ready to believe that a haunted patch of ground can influence airline ticketing? I don't think so. I'll have to pack, Rachel said. She was looking at the flight information Lewis had jotted down on the pad by the phone. Take just the one big suitcase, Lewis said. She looked at him wide-eyed, mildly startled. For both of us? Lewis, you're joking. All right, take a couple of tote bags too, but don't exhaust yourself packing a different outfit for the next 3 weeks, he said, thinking, especially since you may be back in Ludlow very soon. Take enough for a week, 10 days. You got the checkbook and the credit cards. Buy what you need. But we can't afford, she began doubtfully. She seemed doubtful about everything now, malleable, easily confused. He remembered her odd, dangling comment about the Winnebago he had once spoken idly about buying. We have the money, he said. Well, I suppose we could use Gage's college fund if we needed to, although it would take a day or 2 to process the savings account and a week to get the treasury bills cashed. Her face began to crumple and dissolve again. Lewis held her. She's right. It just keeps on hitting you. It never lets up. Rachel, don't, he said. Don't cry. But of course she did. She had to. While she was upstairs packing, the phone rang. Lewis sprang for it, thinking it would be someone from Delta ticketing, saying a mistake had been made. No flights were available. I should have known everything was going too smoothly. But it wasn't Delta ticketing. It was Erwin Goldman. I'll get Rachel, Lewis said. No. For a moment there was nothing else, only silence. He's probably sitting there and trying to decide which name to call you first. When Goldman spoke again, his voice was strained. He seemed to be pushing the words out against some great inner resistance. It's you I want to talk to. Dory wanted me to call and apologize for my behavior. Lewis, I guess I wanted to apologize too. Why, Erwin, how big of you? My God, I think I just wet my pants. You don't need to apologize, Lewis said. His voice was dry and mechanical. What I did was inexcusable, Goldman said. Now he did not just seem to be pushing the words out. He seemed to be coughing them out. You suggesting that Rachel and Eileen come out has made me see what a big man you have been about this, and how small I have been. There was something very familiar in this rap, something eerily familiar. Then he got it, and his mouth suddenly pulled together in a tight pucker, as if he had bitten straight through a plump yellow lemon. Rachel's way, she was completely unaware of it, Lewis was sure, of saying contritely, Lewis, I'm sorry I was such a bitch. After her bitchiness had gotten her own way about something she really wanted. Here was that voice, robbed of Rachel's liveliness and merriness, true, but that same voice saying, I'm sorry I was such a bastard, Lewis. The old man was getting his daughter and granddaughter back. They were running home from Maine to Daddy, courtesy of Delta and United. They were coming back to where they belonged, back to where Erwin Goldman wanted them. Now he could afford to be magnanimous. As far as old Erwin knew, he had won. So let's just forget that I took a swing at you over your dead son's body, Lewis, or that I kicked you when you were down, or that I knocked his coffin off its bier and snapped the latch so you could see, or think you saw, that one last flash of your child's hand. Let's forget all of that. Let bygones be bygones. Terrible as it may be, Erwin, you old prick, I'd wish for you to drop dead right this second if it wouldn't screw up my plans. That's all right, Mr. Goldman, he said evenly. It was, well, an emotional day for all of us. It was not all right, he persisted. And Lewis realized, although he did not want to, that Goldman was not just being political, was not just saying that he was sorry he had been such a bastard now that he was getting his own way. The man was nearly weeping, and he was speaking with a slow and trembling urgency. It was a terrible day for all of us. Thanks to me. Thanks to a stupid, bull-headed old man. I hurt my daughter when she needed my help. I hurt you, and maybe you needed my help too, Lewis. That you do this, behave this way, after I behave that way, it makes me feel like garbage. And I think that is just the way I should feel. Oh, let him stop this, let him stop before I start to scream at him and blow the whole deal. Rachel's probably told you, Lewis, we had another daughter. Zelda, Lewis said. Yes, she told me about Zelda. It was difficult, Goldman said in that trembling voice. Difficult for all of us. Most difficult for Rachel, perhaps. Rachel was there when Zelda died. But difficult for Dory and me, too. Dory almost had a breakdown. What do you think Rachel had? Lewis wanted to shout. Do you think a kid can't have a nervous breakdown? 20 years later, she's still jumping at death's shadow. And now this happens. This miserable, awful thing. It's a minor miracle that she isn't in the fucking hospital being fed through an IV tube. So don't talk to me about how difficult it was for you and your wife, you bastard. Ever since Zelda died, I suppose we have clung to Rachel. Always wanting to protect her. To make it up to her. Make up for the problem she had with her back. For years afterward. Make up for not being there. Yes, the old man was really crying. Why did he have to be crying? It made it harder for Lewis to hold on to his clean, pure hate. More difficult, but not impossible. He deliberately called up the image of Goldman, reaching into the pocket of his smoking jacket for his overflowing checkbook. But he suddenly saw Zelda Goldman in the background, an unquiet ghost in a stinking bed, her cheesy face full of spite and agony, her hands pulled into claws. The Goldman ghost. Oz the Great and Terrible. Please, he said. Please, Mr. Goldman. Irwin. No more. Let's not make things any worse than they have to be, okay? I believe now that you are a good man, and that I misjudged you, Lewis. Oh, listen, I know what you think. Am I that stupid? No. Stupid, but not that stupid. You think I'm saying all of this because now I can. You're thinking, oh yeah, he's getting what he wants. And once he tried to buy me off. But Lewis, I swear, no more, Lewis said gently. I can't. I really can't take any more. Now his voice was trembling as well. Okay. All right, Goldman said and sighed. Lewis thought it was a sigh of relief. But let me say again that I apologize. You don't have to accept it. But that is what I called to say, Lewis. I apologize. All right, Lewis said. He closed his eyes. His head was thudding. Thank you, Irwin. Your apology is accepted. Thank you, Goldman said. And thank you for letting them come. Perhaps it is what they both need. We'll wait for them at the airport. Fine, Lewis said, and an idea suddenly occurred to him. It was crazy and attractive in its very sanity. He would let bygones be bygones, and he would let Gage lie in his Pleasant View grave. Instead of trying to reopen a door that had swung shut, he would latch it and double-bolt it and throw away the key. He would do just what he had told his wife he was going to do. Tidy up their affairs here and catch a plane back to Chi-Town. They would perhaps spend the entire summer there, he and his wife and his good-hearted daughter. They would go to the zoo and the planetarium and boating on the lake. He would take Ellie to the top of the Sears Tower and show her the Midwest stretching away like a great flat game board, rich and dreaming. Then when mid-August came, they would come back to this house, which now seemed so sad and so shadowy, and perhaps it would be like starting over again. Perhaps they could begin weaving from fresh thread. What was on the Creed loom right now was ugly, splattered with drying blood. But would that not be the same as murdering his son, killing him a second time? A voice inside tried to argue that this was not so, but he would not listen. He shut the voice up briskly. Irwin, I ought to go now. I want to make sure Rachel's got what she needs and then get her to bed. All right, goodbye, Lewis. And once more, if he says sorry one more time, I'll fucking scream. Goodbye, Irwin, he said, and hung up the phone. Rachel was deep in a litter of clothes when he came upstairs. Blouses on the beds, bras hung over the backs of chairs, slacks on hangers that had been hung over the doorknob. Shoes were lined up like soldiers under the window. She appeared to be packing slowly, but competently. Lewis could see it was going to take her at least 3 suitcases, maybe 4, but he could also see no sense in arguing with her about it. Instead, he pitched in and helped. Lewis, she said as they closed the last suitcase. He had to sit on it before Rachel could snap the catches. Are you sure there's nothing you want to tell me? For God's sake, hun, what is this? I don't know what it is, she replied evenly. That's why I'm asking. What do you think I'm going to do? Creep off to a bordello? Join the circus? What?
Yeah.
I don't know, but this feels wrong. It feels as if you're trying to get rid of us. Rachel, that's ridiculous. He said this with a vehemence that was partly exasperation. Even in such straits as these, he felt a certain pique in being seen through so easily. She smiled wanly. You never were a very good liar, Lou. He began to protest again, and she cut him off. Ellie dreamed you were dead, she said. Last night. She woke up crying, and I went into her. I slept with her for 2 or 3 hours and then came back in with you. She said that in her dream you were sitting at the kitchen table, and your eyes were open, but she knew you were dead. She said she could hear Steve Masterton screaming. Lewis looked at her, dismayed. Rachel, he said at last, her brother just died. It's normal enough for her to dream that other members of her family. Yes, I surmised that much for myself, but the way she told it, the elements, it seemed to me to have a quality of prophecy. She laughed weakly. Or maybe you had to be there. Yes, maybe so, Lewis said. It seemed to me to have a quality of prophecy. Come to bed with me, Rachel said. The Valium's all worn off and I don't want to take any more. But I'm afraid. I've been having my own dreams. Dreams of what? Of Zelda, she said simply. The last few nights since Gage died, when I go to sleep, Zelda's there. She says she's coming for me and this time she'll get me. That both she and Gage will get me for letting them die. Rachel, that's, I know, just a dream. Normal enough. But come to bed with me and keep the dreams away if you can, Lewis. They lay together in the dark, crowded into Lewis's single. Rachel, you still awake? Yes. I want to ask you something. Go ahead. He hesitated, not wanting to cause her even more pain, but needing to know. Do you remember the scare we had with him when he was 9 months old? He asked finally. Yes, of course I do. Why? By the time Gage was 9 months old, Lewis had become deeply concerned about his son's cranial size. It was right off Lewis's per terrier chart, which showed the normal range of infant head sizes on a per-month basis. At 4 months, Gage's skull size had begun to drift toward the highest part of the curve, and then it began to go even higher than that. He wasn't having any trouble holding his head up. That would have been a dead giveaway. But Lewis had nevertheless taken him to George Tardif, who was perhaps the best neurologist in the Midwest. Rachel had wanted to know what was wrong, and Lewis had told her the truth. He was worried that Gage might be hydrocephalic. Rachel's face had grown very white, but she had remained calm. He seems normal to me, she said. Lewis nodded. He does to me too, but I don't want to ignore this, babe. No, you mustn't, she said. We mustn't. Tardif had measured Gage's skull and frowned. Tardif poked 2 fingers at Gage's face, Three Stooges style. Gage flinched. Tardif smiled. Lewis's heart thawed out a little. Tardif gave Gage a ball to hold. Gage held it for a while and then dropped it. Tardif retrieved the ball and bounced it, watching Gage's eyes. Gage's eyes tracked the ball. I'd say there's a 50-50 chance he's hydrocephalic, Tardif said to Lewis in his office later. No, the odds may actually be a bit higher than that. If so, it's mild. He seems very alert. The new shunt operation should take care of the problem easily. If there is a problem. A shunt means brain surgery, Lewis said. Minor brain surgery. Lewis had studied the process not long after he began to worry about the size of Gage's head, and the shunt operation, designed to drain excess fluid, had not looked very minor to him. But he kept his mouth shut, telling himself to be grateful the operation existed at all. Of course, Tardif went on, there's still a large possibility that your kid just has a real big head for a 9-month-old. I think a CAT scan is the best place to start. Do you agree? Lewis had agreed. Gage spent a night in Our Sisters of Charity Hospital and underwent general anesthesia. His sleeping head was stuck into a gadget that looked like a giant clothes dryer. Rachel and Lewis waited downstairs while Ellie spent the day at Grandma and Grandad's, watching Sesame Street nonstop on Grandad's new video recorder. For Lewis, those had been long, gray hours in which he found himself totting up sums of varying ugliness and comparing results. Death under general anesthesia, death during a shunt operation, mild retardation as a result of hydrocephalus, cataclysmic retardation as a result of same, epilepsy, blindness. Oh, there were all sorts of possibilities. For really complete disaster maps, Lewis remembered thinking. See your local doctor. Tardif had come into the waiting room around 5 o'clock. He had 3 cigars. He plugged one into Lewis's mouth, one into Rachel's, she was too flabbergasted to protest, and one into his own. The kid is fine. No hydrocephalus. Light this thing, Rachel had said, weeping and laughing at the same time. I'm going to smoke it till I puke. Grinning, Tardif lit their cigars. God was saving him for Route 15, Dr. Tardif, Lewis thought now. Rachel, if he had been hydrocephalic, and if the shunt hadn't worked, could you have still loved him? What a weird question, Lewis. Could you? Yes, of course, I would have loved Gage no matter what. Even if he was retarded. Yes. Would you have wanted him institutionalized? No, I don't think so, she said slowly. I suppose with the money you're making now, we could afford that. A really good place, I mean. But I think I'd want him with us if we could. Lewis, why do you ask? Why, I suppose I was still thinking of your sister Zelda, he said. He was still astonished at this eerie glibness, wondering if you could have gone through that again. It wouldn't have been the same, she said, sounding almost amused. Gage was Gage. He was our son. That would have made all the difference. It would have been hard, I guess, but would you have wanted him in an institution? A place like Pineland? No. Let's go to sleep. That's a good idea. I feel like I can sleep now, she said. I want to put this day behind me. Amen to that, Lewis said. A long time later, she said drowsily. You're right, Lewis. Just dreams and vapors. Sure, he said, and kissed her earlobe. Now sleep. It seemed to me to have a quality of prophecy. He did not sleep for a long time, and before he did, the curved bone of the moon looked in the window at him. 43. The following day was overcast, but very warm, and Lewis was sweating heavily by the time he had checked Rachel's and Ellie's baggage through and gotten their tickets out of the computer. He supposed just being able to keep busy was something of a gift, and he felt only a small, aching comparison to the last time he had put his family on a plane to Chicago at Thanksgiving. Ellie seemed distant and a trifle odd. Several times that morning, Lewis had looked up and seen an expression of peculiar speculation on her face. Conspirators complex working overtime, boyo, he told himself. She said nothing when told they were all going to Chicago, she and Mommy first, perhaps for the whole summer, and only went on eating her breakfast. Cocoa Bears. After breakfast, she went silently upstairs and got into the dress and shoes Rachel had laid out for her. She had brought the picture of her pulling Gage on her sled to the airport with her, and she sat calmly in one of the plastic contour seats in the lower lobby, while Lewis stood in line for their tickets, and the loudspeaker blared intelligence of arriving and departing flights. Mr. and Mrs. Goldman showed up 40 minutes before flight time. Irwin Goldman was natty and apparently sweatless, in a cashmere topcoat in spite of the 60-degree temperatures. He went over to the Avis desk to check his car in while Dory Goldman sat with Rachel and Ellie. Lewis and Goldman joined the others at the same time. Lewis was a bit afraid that there might be a reprise of the my son, playlet, but he was spared. Goldman contented himself with a rather limp handshake and a muttered hello. The quick, embarrassed glance he afforded his son-in-law confirmed the certainty Lewis had awakened with this morning. The man must have been drunk. They went upstairs on the escalator and sat in the boarding lounge, not talking much. Dory Goldman thumbed nervously at her copy of an Erica Jong novel, but did not open it. She kept glancing a little nervously at the picture Ellie was holding. Lewis asked his daughter if she would like to walk over to the bookstore with him and pick out something to read on the plane. Ellie had been looking at him in that speculative way again. Lewis didn't like it. It made him nervous. Will you be good at Grandma and Grandad's? He asked her as they walked over. Yes, she said. Daddy, will the truant officer get me? Andy Pasioka says there's a truant officer and he gets school skippers. Don't you worry about the truant officer, he said. I'll take care of the school, and you can start again in the fall with no trouble. I hope I'll be okay in the fall, Ellie said. I never was in a grade before, only kindergarten. I don't know what kids do in grades. Homework, probably. You'll be fine. Daddy, are you still pissed off at Granda? He gaped at her. Why in the world would you think that I didn't like your Granda, Ellie? She shrugged as if the topic held no particular interest for her. When you talk about him, you always look pissed off. Ellie, that's vulgar. Sorry. She gave him that strange, fey look, and then drifted off to look at the racks of kid books. Mercer Mayer and Maurice Sendak and Richard Scarry and Beatrix Potter and that famous old standby Dr. Seuss. How do they find this stuff out? Or do they just know? How much does Ellie know? How's it affecting her? Ellie, what's behind that pale little face? Pissed off at him. Christ. Can I have these, Daddy? She was holding out a Dr. Seuss and a book Lewis hadn't seen since his own childhood. The story of Little Black Sambo and how the tigers had gotten his clothes one fine day. I thought they'd made that one an unbook, Lewis thought, bemused. Yes, he said, and they stood in a short line at the cash register. Your granda and I like each other fine, he said, and thought again of his mother's story, of how when a woman really wanted a baby, she found one. He remembered his own foolish promises to himself that he would never lie to his own children. Over the last few days he had developed into quite a promising liar, he felt, but he would not let himself think about it now. Oh, she said, and fell silent. The silence made him uneasy. To break it, he said, so do you think you'll have a good time in Chicago? No. No, why not? She looked up at him with that fey expression. I'm scared. He put his hand on her head. Scared? Honey, what for? You're not scared of the plane, are you? No, she said. I don't know what I'm scared of. Daddy, I dreamed we were at Gage's funeral, and the funeral man opened his coffin, and it was empty. Then I dreamed I was home, and I looked in Gage's crib, and that was empty too. But there was dirt in it. Lazarus, come forth. For the first time in months, he remembered the dream he had had after Pascal's death. The dream, and then waking up to find his feet dirty, and the foot of the bed caked with pine needles and muck. The hairs at the nape of his neck stirred. Just dreams, he said to Ellie, and his voice sounded, to his ears at least, perfectly normal. They'll pass. I wish you were coming with us, she said, or that we were staying here. Can we stay, Daddy? Please? I don't want to go to Grandma and Grandad's. I just want to go back to school, okay? Just for a little while, Ellie, he said. I've got, he swallowed, a few things to do here, and then I'll be with you. We can decide what to do next. He expected an argument, perhaps even an Ellie-style tantrum. He might even have welcomed it, a known quantity, as that look was not. But there was only that pallid, disquieting silence, which seemed so deep. He could have asked her more, but found he didn't dare. She had already told him more than he perhaps wanted to hear. Shortly after he and Ellie returned to the boarding lounge, the flight was called. Boarding passes were produced, and the four of them got in line. Lewis embraced his wife and kissed her hard. She clung to him for a moment, and then let him go so he could pick Ellie up and buss her cheek. Ellie gazed at him solemnly with her Sybil's eyes. I don't want to go, she said again, but so low only Lewis could really hear over the shuffle and murmur of the boarding passengers. I don't want Mommy to go either. Ellie, come on, Lewis said. You'll be fine. I'll be fine, she said. But what about you? Daddy, what about you? The line had begun to move now. People were walking down the jetway to the 727. Rachel pulled Ellie's hand, and for a moment she resisted, holding up the line, her eyes fixed on her father. And Lewis found himself remembering her impatience last time, her cries of, come on, come on, come on. Daddy? Go now, Ellie, please. Rachel looked at Ellie, and she saw that dark, dreamy look for the first time. Ellie? She said, startled and, Lewis thought, a little afraid. You're holding up the line, baby. Ellie's lips trembled and grew white. Then she allowed herself to be led into the jetway. She looked back at him, and he saw naked terror in her face. He raised his hand to her in false cheeriness. Ellie did not wave back. 44. As Lewis left the BIA terminal building, a cold cloak fell over his mind. He became aware that he meant to go through with this. His mind, which had been sharp enough to get him through med school, mostly on a scholarship, and what his wife could earn, pushing coffee and Danish on the 5 to 11 a.m. shift 6 days a week, had taken the problem over and broken it down into components, as if this was just another prelim, the biggest one he had ever taken, and he intended to pass it with an A+, 100%. He drove to Brewer, the little city across the Penobscot River from Bangor. He found a parking spot across the street from Watson's Hardware. Can I help you? The clerk asked. Yes, Lewis said. I'd like a heavy flashlight, one of the square ones, and something I can hood it with. The clerk was a small, slim man with a high forehead and sharp eyes. He smiled now, but his smile was not particularly pleasant. Going jacking, good buddy? I beg your pardon? Gonna jacklight a few deer tonight? Not at all, Lewis said, unsmiling. I haven't a license to jack. The clerk blinked and then decided to laugh. In other words, mind my own business, huh? Well, look, you can't hood one of those big lights, but you can get a piece of felt and poke a hole in the middle of it. Cut the beam down to a pen light. That sounds fine, Lewis said. Thanks. Surely. Anything else for you today? Yes, indeed, Lewis said. I need a pick, a shovel, and a spade. Short-handled shovel, long-handled spade. A stout length of rope, 8 feet long. A pair of work gloves. A canvas tarpaulin, maybe 8 by 8. I can do all that, the clerk said. I've got a septic tank to dig up, Lewis said. It looks like I'm in violation of the zoning ordinances, and I've got some very nosy neighbors. I don't know if hooding my light will do any good or not, but I thought I might give it a try. I could get a pretty good fine. Oh, the clerk said. Better get a clothespin for your nose while you're at it. Lewis laughed dutifully. His purchases came to $58.60. He paid cash. As gas prices went up, they had used the big station wagon less and less. For some time it had had a bad wheel bearing, but Lewis had kept putting off the repair job. This was partly because he didn't want to part with the $200 it was likely to cost, but mostly because it was a nuisance. Now, when he could have really used the big old dinosaur, he didn't dare chance it. The Civic was a hatchback, and Lewis was nervous about going back to Ludlow with the pick, shovel, and spade in there. Judd Crandall's eyes were sharp, and there was nothing wrong with his brains either. He would know what was up. Then it occurred to him that there was no real reason to go back to Ludlow anyway. Lewis recrossed the Chamberlain Bridge into Bangor and checked into the Howard Johnson's motor lodge on the Odland Road. Once again near the airport, once again near Pleasant View Cemetery where his son was buried. He checked in under the name D.D. Ramon and paid cash for his room. He tried to nap, reasoning that he would be glad of the rest before tomorrow morning. In the words of some Victorian novel or other, there was wild work ahead of him tonight, enough wild work to last a lifetime. But his brain simply would not shut down. He lay on the anonymous motel bed, beneath a nondescript motel print of picturesque boats at dock beside a picturesque old wharf in a picturesque New England harbor, fully dressed except for his shoes, his wallet, coins, and keys on the night table beside him, his hands behind his head. That feeling of coldness still held. He felt totally unplugged from his people, the places that had become so familiar to him, even his work. This could have been any Howard Johnsons in the world, in San Diego, or Duluth, or Bangkok, or Charlotte Amalia. He was nowhere, and now and then a thought of surpassing oddity struck him. Before he saw any of those familiar places and faces again, he would see his son. His plan kept unreeling in his mind. He looked at it from all angles, poked it, prodded it, looked for holes or soft places, and he felt that in truth he was walking along a narrow beam over a gulf of insanity. Madness was all around him, softly fluttering as the wings of night-hunting owls with great golden eyes. He was heading into madness. The voice of Tom Rush echoed dreamily in his head. "Oh, death, your hands are clammy. I feel them on my knees. You came and took my mother. Won't you come back after me?" Madness. Madness all around, close, hunting him. He walked the balance beam of rationality. He studied his plan. Tonight, around 11 o'clock, he would dig up his son's grave, remove the body from the coffin in which it lay, wrap Gage in a cut-down piece of the tarpaulin, and put it in the trunk of the Civic. He would replace the coffin and refill the grave. He would drive to Ludlow, take Gage's body from the trunk, and take a walk. Yes, he would take a walk. If Gage returned, the single path forked into two possibilities. Along one, he saw Gage, returning as Gage, perhaps stunned or slow or even retarded. Only in the deepest recesses of his mind did Lewis allow himself to hope that Gage would return whole, and just as he had been. But surely even that was possible, wasn't it? But still his son, Rachel's son, Ellie's brother. Along the other, he saw some sort of monster emerging from the woods behind the house. He had accepted so much that he did not balk at the idea of monsters, or even of demons, discorporeal beings of evil from the outer world, which might well take charge of a reanimated body from which the original soul had fled. Either way, he and his son would be alone, and he would, "I will make a diagnosis." Yes, that's what he would do. "I will make a diagnosis, not only of his body, but of his spirit. I will make allowances for the trauma, the accident itself, which he may or may not remember. Keeping the example of church before me, I will expect retardation, perhaps mild, perhaps profound. I will judge our ability to reintegrate Gage into our family on the basis of what I see over a period of from 24 to 72 hours. And if the loss is too great, or if he comes back as Timmy Baterman apparently came back, as a thing of evil, I will kill him." As a doctor, he felt he could kill Gage, if Gage was only the vessel containing some other being, quite easily. He would not allow himself to be swayed by its pleading or its wiles. He would kill it as he would kill a rat carrying bubonic plague. There need be no melodrama about it. A pill in solution, perhaps 2 or 3 of them, if necessary a shot. There was morphine in his bag. The following night, he would return the lifeless clay to Pleasant View and reinter it, simply trusting that his luck would hold a second time. "You don't even know if it will hold once," he reminded himself. He had considered the easier and safer alternative of the pet cemetery, but he would not have his son up there. There were a lot of reasons. A child burying his pet 5 years or 10 years or even 20 years later might stumble on the remains. That was one reason. But the most compelling one was simpler. The pet cemetery might be too close. The reinterment completed, he would fly to Chicago and join his family. Neither Rachel nor Ellie would ever need to know about his failed experiment. Then, looking along the other path, the path he hoped for blindly with all his love for his son, he and Gage would leave the house when the examination period was over, would leave at night. He would take certain papers with him and plan never to return to Ludlow again. He and Gage would check into a motel, perhaps this very one in which he now lay. The following morning, he would cash every account they had, converting everything into American Express traveler's checks. "Don't leave home with your resurrected son without them," he thought. And flat cash. He and Gage would fly somewhere. Florida, most likely. From there, he would call Rachel, tell her where he was, tell her to take Ellie and catch a plane without telling her mother and father where she was going. Lewis believed he could convince her to do this. "Ask no questions, Rachel, just come. Come now, this minute." He would tell her where they were staying, some motel. She and Ellie would arrive in a rental car. He would bring Gage to the door when they knocked. Perhaps Gage would be wearing a bathing suit. And then, but beyond that, he did not dare go. Instead, he turned back to the plan's beginning and began to go over it again. He supposed that if things worked out, it would mean accumulating the identification minutiae of whole new lives so that Irwin Goldman could not use his overflowing checkbook to trace them. Such things could be done. Vaguely, he remembered arriving at the Ludlow house, tense, tired, and more than a little scared, and having some fantasy about just driving down to Orlando and hiring on as a medic at Disney World. Maybe that wasn't so far-fetched after all.
Wow.
He saw himself, dressed in white, resuscitating a pregnant woman who had foolishly gone on the Magic Mountain ride and had fainted. Stand back, give her some air, he heard himself saying,
He'd come
and the woman
here.
opened her eyes and smiled gratefully at him. As his mind spun out this not disagreeable fantasy, Lewis fell asleep. He slept as his daughter awoke in an airplane somewhere above Niagara Falls, screaming from a nightmare of clutching hands and stupid yet merciless eyes. He slept as the stewardess rushed down the aisle to see what was wrong. He slept as Rachel, totally unnerved, tried to soothe her. He slept as Ellie cried over and over again. It's Gage, Mommy, it's Gage, it's Gage. Gage is alive. Gage has got the knife from Daddy's bag. Don't let him get me. Don't let him get Daddy. He slept as Ellie quieted at last and lay shuddering against her mother's breast, her eyes wide and tearless. And as Dory Goldman thought what an awful thing all of this had been for Eileen, and how much she reminded Dory of Rachel after Zelda had died. He slept and woke up at 5:15, with the afternoon light beginning to slant down toward the coming night. Wild work, he thought stupidly, and got up. 45. By the time United Airlines Flight 419 touched down at O'Hare Airport and offloaded its passengers at 3 Central Standard Time, Ellie Creed was in a state of low hysteria, and Rachel was very frightened. If you touched Ellie casually on the shoulder, she jumped and stared around at you with big wall eyes, and her whole body quivered steadily and without let-up. It was as if she were full of electricity. The nightmare on the airplane had been bad enough, but this, Rachel simply didn't know how to cope with it. Going into the terminal, Ellie tripped over her own feet and fell down. She did not get up, but merely lay there on the carpet, with people passing around her, or looking down at her with that mildly sympathetic but disconnected glance of people who are in transit and cannot be bothered, until Rachel picked her up in her arms. Ellie, what's wrong with you? Rachel asked. But Ellie would not answer. They moved across the lobby toward the luggage carousels, and Rachel saw her mother and father waiting there for them. She waved at them with her free hand, and they came over. They told us not to go to the gate and wait for you, Dory said. So we thought, Rachel, how's Eileen? Not good. Is there a ladies' room, Mommy? I'm going to throw up. Oh, God, Rachel said despairingly, and took her by the hand. There was a ladies' room across the lobby, and she led Ellie toward it quickly. Rachel, shall I come? Dory called. No, get the luggage. You know what it looks like. We're okay. Mercifully, the ladies' room was deserted. Rachel led Ellie to one of the stalls, fumbling in her purse for a dime, and then she saw, thank God, that the locks of 3 of them were broken. Over one broken lock, someone had written in grease pencil, Sir John Crapper was a sexist pig. Rachel pulled the door open quickly. Ellie was now moaning and holding her stomach. She retched twice, but there was no vomiting. There were the dry heaves of total nervous exhaustion. When Ellie told her she felt a little better, Rachel took her over to the basins and washed her daughter's face. Ellie was wretchedly white, and there were circles under her eyes. Ellie, what is wrong? Can't you tell me? I don't know what's wrong, she said. But I knew something was wrong ever since Daddy told me about the trip, because something was wrong with him. Lewis, what are you hiding? You were hiding something. I could see it. Even Ellie could see it. It occurred to her that she had also been nervous all day, as though waiting for a blow to fall. She felt the way she did in the 2 or 3 days before her period, tense and on edge, ready to laugh or cry or get a headache that would come bulleting through like a fast express, there and then gone 3 hours later. What? She said now, to Ellie's reflection in the mirror. Honey, what could be wrong with Daddy? I don't know, Ellie said. It was the dream. Something about Gage. Or maybe it was church. I don't remember. I don't know. Ellie, what was your dream? I dreamed I was in the pet cemetery, Ellie said. Paxcow took me to the pet cemetery and said Daddy was going to go there and something terrible was going to happen. Paxcow? A bolt of terror, both sharp and yet undefined, struck her. What was that name, and why did it seem familiar? It seemed that she had heard that name, or one like it, but she could not for the life of her remember where. You dreamed someone named Paxcow took you to the pet cemetery? Yes, that's what he said his name was, and her eyes suddenly widened.
Does Ellie have The Shining? I never really realized that till now. She might have The Shining. They should have. He should do a sequel to this, like Doctor Sleep, not like fucking Pet Cemetery 2. But man, I hope he one day does it. I hope he makes a sequel, a real sequel that goes with Ellie, similar to Doctor Sleep. That'd be so dope.
Do you remember something else? He said that he was sent to warn, but that he couldn't interfere. He said that he was, I don't know, that he was near Daddy because they were together when his soul was I can't remember, she wailed. Honey, Rachel said, I think you dreamed about the pet cemetery because you're still thinking about Gage, and I'm sure Daddy is fine. Do you feel any better now? No, Ellie whispered. Mommy, I'm scared. Aren't you scared? Rachel said, with a brisk little shake of her head and a smile. But she was scared, and that name, Paxcow, haunted her with its familiarity. She felt she had heard it in some dreadful context, months or even years ago, and that nervy feeling would not leave her. She felt something pregnant, swollen, and waiting to burst. Something terrible that needed to be averted. But what? What? I'm sure everything is fine, she told Ellie. Want to go back to Grandma and Granda? I guess so, Ellie said listlessly. A Puerto Rican woman led her very young son into the ladies, scolding him. A large wet stain had spread on the crotch of the little boy's Bermudas, and Rachel found herself reminded of Gage, with a kind of paralyzing poignancy. This fresh sorrow was like Novocaine, smothering her jitters. Come on, she said. We'll call Daddy from Granda's house. He was wearing shorts, Ellie said suddenly, looking back at the little boy. Who was, honey? Pascal, Ellie said. He was wearing red shorts in my dream. That brought the name momentarily into focus, and Rachel felt that knee-weakening fear again. Then it danced away. They could not get close to the luggage carousel. Rachel could just see the top of her father's hat, the one with the feather. Dory Goldman was holding 2 seats against the wall for them and waving. Rachel brought Ellie over. Are you feeling any better, dear? Dory asked. A little bit, Ellie said. Mommy? She turned to Rachel and broke off. Rachel was sitting bolt upright, her hand clapped to her mouth, her face white. She had it. It had suddenly gone through with a terrible thud. Of course she should have known at once, but she had tried to put it out of her mind. Of course. Mommy? Rachel turned slowly to her daughter, and Ellie could hear the tendons in her neck creak. She took her hand away from her mouth. Did the man in your dream tell you his first name, Eileen? Mommy, are you all— Did the man in your dream tell you his first name? Dory was looking at her daughter and granddaughter as if they might have both gone crazy. Yes, but I can't remember. Mommy, you're hurting me. Rachel looked down and saw that her free hand was clamped around Ellie's lower forearm, like a manacle. Was it Victor? Ellie drew a sharp breath. Yes, Victor. He said his name was Victor. Mommy, did you dream of him too? Not Pascal, Rachel said. Pascal. That's what I said, Pascal. Rachel, what's wrong? Dory said. She took Rachel's free hand and winced at its chill. And what's wrong with Eileen? It's not Eileen, Rachel said. It's Louis, I think. Something is wrong with Louis. Or something is going to be wrong. Sit with Ellie, Mom. I want to call home. She got up and crossed to the telephones, digging in her purse for a quarter. She made the call collect, but there was no one to accept the charges. The phone simply rang. Will you try your call later? The operator asked her. Yes, Rachel said and hung up. She stood there, staring at the phone. He said that he was sent to warn, but that he couldn't interfere. He said that he was near Daddy because they were together when his soul was I can't remember. Discorporated, Rachel whispered. Her fingers dug at the fabric of her handbag. Oh my God, was that the word? She tried to catch at her thoughts, to arrange them. Was something going on here? Something beyond their natural upset at Gage's death, and this queer cross-country trip that was so much like flight? How much had Ellie known about the young man who had died on Louis's first day at work? Nothing, her mind answered inexorably. You kept it from her, the way you tried to keep anything from her that had to do with death, even the possible death of her cat. Remember the dumb, stupid argument we had that day in the pantry? You kept it from her, because you were scared then and you're scared now. His name was Pascal, Victor Pascal. And how desperate is the situation now, Rachel? How bad is this? What in the name of God is happening? Her hands were trembling so badly that it took her 2 tries to redeposit her quarter. This time she called the infirmary at the university and got Charlton, who accepted the call, a little mystified. No, she hadn't seen Louis and would have been surprised if he had come in today. That said, she offered her sympathies to Rachel again. Rachel accepted them, and then asked Charlton to have Louis call her at her folks' house if he did come in. Yes, he had the number, she answered Charlton's question, not wanting to tell the nurse, who probably knew anyway. She had a feeling that Charlton didn't miss much, that her folks' house was half the continent away. She hung up, feeling hot and trembly. She heard Pascal's name somewhere else, that's all. My God, you don't raise a kid in a glass box like a hamster or something. She heard an item about it on the radio, or some kid mentioned it to her at school, and her mind stored it away. Even that word she couldn't say. Suppose it was a jawbreaker like discorporated or discorporeal, so what? That proves nothing except that the subconscious is exactly the kind of sticky flypaper the Sunday supplements say it is. She remembered a college psych instructor who had asserted that under the right conditions, your memory could play back the names of every person to whom you had ever been introduced, every meal you had ever eaten, the weather conditions which had obtained on every day of your life. He made a persuasive case for this incredible assertion, telling them that the human mind was a computer with staggering numbers of memory chips, not 16K or 32K or 64K, but perhaps as much as 1 billion K, literally 1,000 billion. And how much might each of these organic chips be capable of storing?
I'll be right back real quick.
There were so many of them, he said, that there was no need for any of them to be erasable, so they could be reused. In fact, the conscious mind had to turn down the lights on some of them as a protection against informational insanity. You might not be able to remember where you keep your socks, the psych instructor had said, if the entire contents of the Encyclopedia Britannica was stored in the adjacent 2 or 3 memory cells. This had produced dutiful laughter from the class. But this isn't a psych class under good fluorescent lights, with all that comforting jargon written on the board, and some smart-ass assistant prof cheerfully blue-skying his way through the last 15 minutes of the period. Something is dreadfully wrong here, and you know it. You feel it. I don't know what it has to do with Pascal, or Gage, or church, but it has something to do with Louis. What? Is it? Suddenly a thought as cold as a handful of jelly struck her. She picked up the telephone receiver again, and groped in the coin return for her quarter. Was Louis contemplating suicide? Was that why he had gotten rid of them, nearly pushed them out the door? Had Ellie somehow had oh, fuck psychology. Had she had a psychic flash of some sort? This time she made the call collect to Judd Crandall. It rang 5 times, 6, 7. She was about to hang up when his voice, breathless, answered. Hello? Judd, this is... Just a minute, ma'am, the operator said. Will you accept a collect call from Mrs. Lewis Creed? Yeah, Judd said. Pardon, sir, is that yes or no? I guess I will, Judd said. There was a doubtful pause as the operator translated Yankee into American. Then, thank you. Go ahead, ma'am. Judd, have you seen Lewis today? Today? I can't say I have, Rachel. But I was away to Brewer this morning, getting my groceries. Been out in the garden this afternoon behind the house. Why? Oh, it's probably nothing, but Ellie had a bad dream on the plane, and I just thought I'd set her mind at ease if I could. Plane? Judd's voice seemed to sharpen a trifle. Where are you, Rachel? Chicago, she said. Ellie and I came back to spend some time with my parents. Lewis didn't go with you? He's going to join us by the end of the week, Rachel said, and now it was a struggle to keep her voice even. There was something in Judd's voice she didn't like. Was it his idea that you should go out there? Well, yes, Judd, what's wrong? Something is wrong, isn't it? And you know something about it. Maybe you ought to tell me the child's dream, Judd said after a long pause. I wish you would. 46.
Oh, God.
After he and Rachel were done talking, Judd put on his light coat. The day had clouded up and the wind had begun to blow, and crossed the road to Lewis's house, pausing on his side of the road to look carefully for trucks before crossing. It was the trucks that had been the cause of all this, the damn trucks. Except it wasn't. He could feel the pet cemetery pulling at him, and something beyond, where once its voice had been a kind of seductive lullaby, the voice of possible comfort and a dreamy sort of power. It was now lower and more than ominous. It was threatening and grim. Stay out of this, you. But he would not stay out of it. His responsibility went back too far. He saw that Lewis's Honda Civic was gone from the garage. There was only the big Ford wagon, looking dusty and unused. He tried the back door of the house and found it open. Lewis, he called, knowing that Lewis was not going to answer, but needing to cut across the heavy silence of this house somehow. Oh, getting old was starting to be a pain in the ass. His limbs felt heavy and clumsy most of the time. His back was a misery to him after a mere 2 hours in the garden, and it felt as if there was a screw auger planted in his left hip. He began to go through the house methodically, looking for signs he had to look for. World's oldest housebreaker, he thought without much humor, and went right on looking. He found none of the things that would have seriously upset him. Boxes of toys held back from the Salvation Army. Clothes for a small boy, put aside behind a door, or in the closet, or under a bed. Perhaps worst of all, the crib, carefully set up in Gage's room again. There were absolutely none of the signs, but the house still had an unpleasant blank feel, as if it were waiting to be filled with, well, something. Perhaps I ought to take a little run out to Pleasant View Cemetery, see if anything's doing out there. Might even run into Lewis Creed. I could buy him a dinner or something. But it wasn't at Pleasant View Cemetery in Bangor that there was danger. The danger was here, in this house, and beyond it. Judd left again and crossed the road to his own house. He pulled a 6-pack of beer out of the kitchen fridge and took it into the living room. He sat down in front of the bay window that looked out on the Creed house, cracked a beer, and lit a cigarette. The afternoon drew down around him, and as it did so often these last few years, he would find his mind turning back and back in a widening gyre. If he had known the run of Rachel Creed's earlier thoughts, he could have told her that what her psych teacher had told her was maybe the truth. But when you got older, that dimming function of the memory broke down, little by little, the same way that everything else in your body broke down, and you found yourself recalling places and faces and events with an eerie surety. Sepia-toned memories grew bright again, the colors truing up, the voices losing that tinny echo of time and regaining their original resonance. It wasn't informational breakdowns at all, Judd could have told him. The name for it was senility. In his mind, Judd again saw Lester Morgan's bull, Hanratty, his eyes rimmed with red, charging at everything in sight, everything that moved, charging at trees when the wind jigged the leaves. Before Lester gave up and called it off, every tree in Hanratty's fenced meadow was gored with his brainless fury, and his horns were splintered and his head was bleeding. When Lester put Hanratty down, Lester had been sick with dread, the way Judd himself was right now. He drank beer and smoked. Daylight faded. He did not put on the light. Gradually, the tip of his cigarette became a small red pip in the darkness. He sat and drank beer and watched Lewis Creed's driveway. He believed that when Lewis came home from wherever he was, he would go over and have a little talk with him, make sure Lewis wasn't planning to do anything he shouldn't. And still he felt the soft tug of whatever it was, whatever sick power it was that inhabited that devil's place, reaching down from its bluff of rotted stone, where all those cairns had been built. Stay out of this, you. Stay out of it, or you're going to be very, very sorry. Ignoring it as best he could, Judd sat and smoked and drank beer, and waited. 47. While Judd Crandall was sitting in the ladder-backed rocker and watching for him out of his bay window, Lewis was eating a big, tasteless dinner in the Howard Johnson's dining room. The food was plentiful and dull, exactly what his body seemed to want. Outside it had grown dark. The headlights of the passing cars probed like fingers. He shoveled the food in. A steak, a baked potato, a side dish of beans which were a bright green nature had never intended, a wedge of apple pie with a scoop of ice cream on top of it, melting into a soft drool. He ate at a corner table, watching people come and go, wondering if he might not see someone he knew. In a vague way, he rather hoped that would happen. It would lead to questions. Where's Rachel? What are you doing here? How's it going? And perhaps the questions would lead to complications, and maybe complications were what he really wanted. A way out. And as a matter of fact, a couple that he did know came in just as he was finishing his apple pie and his second cup of coffee. Rob Grinnell, a Bangor doctor, and his pretty wife Barbara. He waited for them to see him, sitting here in the corner at his table for one, but the hostess led them to the booths on the far side of the room, and Lewis lost sight of them entirely, except for an occasional glimpse of Grinnell's prematurely graying hair. The waitress brought Lewis his check. He signed for it, jotting his room number under his signature, and left by the side door. Outside, the wind had risen to near-gale force. It was a steady, droning presence, making the electrical wires hum oddly. He could see no stars, but had a sense of clouds rushing past overhead at high speed. Lewis stood on the walk for a moment, hands in pockets, face tilted into that wind. Then he turned back and went up to his room and turned on the television. It was too early to do anything serious, and that night wind was too full of possibilities. It made him nervous. He watched 4 hours of TV, 8 back-to-back half-hour comedy programs. He realized it had been a very long time since he had watched so much TV in a steady, uninterrupted stream. He thought that all the female leads on the sitcoms were what he and his friends had called cock teasers back in high school. In Chicago, Dory Goldman was wailing, "Fly back! Honey, why do you want to fly back? You just got here!" In Ludlow, Judd Crandall sat by his bay window, smoking and drinking beer, motionless, examining the mental scrapbook of his own past, and waiting for Lewis to come home. Sooner or later, Lewis would come home, just like Lassie in that old movie. There were other ways up to the pet cemetery and the place beyond, but Lewis didn't know them. If he intended to do it, he would begin from his own dooryard. Unaware of these other happenings, like slow-moving projectiles aimed not at where he was, but rather in the best ballistics tradition, at the place where he would be, Lewis sat and watched the Hojo color television set. He had never seen any of these programs before, but he had heard vague rumors of them. A black family, a white family, a little kid who was smarter than the rich grown-ups he lived with, a woman who was single, a woman who was married, a woman who was divorced. He watched it all, sitting in the Hojo chair and glancing out every now and then at the blowy night. When the 11 o'clock news came on, he turned the television set off and went out to do what he had decided to do, perhaps at the very moment he had seen Gage's baseball cap lying in the road, full of blood. The coldness was on him again, stronger than ever, but there was something beneath it, an ember of eagerness, or passion, or perhaps lust. No matter. It warmed him against the cold and kept him together in the wind. As he started the Honda's engine, he thought that perhaps Judd was right about the growing power of that place, for surely he felt it around him now, leading or pushing him on. And he wondered, could I stop? Could I stop even if I wanted to? 48. You want to what? Dory asked again. Rachel, you're upset. A night's sleep? Rachel only shook her head. She could not explain to her mother why she had to go back. The feeling had risen in her the way a wind rises. An early stirring of the grasses, hardly noticed. Then the air begins to move faster and harder, and there is no calm left. Then the gusts become hard enough to make eerie screaming noises around the eaves. Then they are shaking the house, and you realize that this is something like a hurricane, and if the wind gets much higher, things are going to fall down. It was 6 o'clock in Chicago. In Bangor, Lewis was just sitting down to his big, tasteless meal. Rachel and Ellie had done no more than pick at their dinners. Rachel kept raising her eyes from her plate to find her daughter's dark glance upon her, asking her what she was going to do about whatever trouble Daddy was in, asking her what she was going to do. She waited for the telephone to ring, for Judd to call and tell her that Lewis had come home, and once it did ring, she jumped, and Ellie almost spilled her glass of milk. But it was only a lady from Dory's bridge club, wanting to know if she had gotten home all right. They were having their coffee when Rachel had abruptly tossed down her napkin and said, Daddy, Mom, I'm sorry, but I have to go home. If I can get a plane, I'm going tonight. Her mother and father had gaped at her, but Ellie had closed her eyes in an adult expression of relief. It would have been funny if not for the waxy, stretched quality of her skin. They did not understand, and Rachel could no more explain than she could have explained how those tiny puffs of wind, so faint they can barely stir the tips of short grass, can gradually grow in power until they can knock a steel building flat. She did not believe that Ellie had heard a news item about the death of Victor Pascal, and filed it away in her subconscious. Rachel, honey, her father spoke slowly, kindly, the way one might speak to someone in the grip of a transitory but dangerous hysteria. This is all just a reaction to your son's death. You and Ellie are both reacting strongly to that, and who could blame you? But you'll just collapse if you try to. Rachel did not answer him. She went to the telephone in the hall, found Airlines in the yellow pages, and dialed Delta's number while Dory stood close by, telling her they ought to just think about this. Didn't she think? They ought to talk about it, perhaps make a list. And beyond her, Ellie stood, her face still dark. But now it was lit by enough hope to give Rachel some courage. Delta Airlines? The voice on the other end said brightly. This is Kim. May I help you? I hope so, Rachel said. It's extremely important that I get from Chicago to Bangor tonight. It's a bit of an emergency, I'm afraid. Can you check the connections for me? Dubiously. Yes, ma'am, but this is very short notice. Well, please check, Rachel said, her voice cracking a little. I'll take standby. Anything. All right, ma'am, please hold. The line became smoothly silent. Rachel closed her eyes, and after a moment she felt a cool hand on her arm. She opened her eyes and saw that Ellie had moved next to her. Irwin and Dory stood together, talking quietly and looking at them. The way you look at people you suspect of being lunatics, Rachel thought wearily. She mustered a smile for Ellie. Don't let them stop you, Mommy. Ellie said in a low voice. Please. No way, big sister, Rachel said, and then winced. It was what they had called her ever since Gage had been born. But she was no one's big sister anymore, was she? Thank you, Ellie said. It's very important, isn't it? Ellie nodded. Honey, I believe that it is, but you could help me if you could tell me more. Is it just the dream? No, Ellie said. It's everything now. It's running all through me now. Can't you feel it, Mommy? Something like a wind. Ellie sighed shakily. But you don't know what it is. You don't remember anything more about your dream. Ellie thought hard and then shook her head reluctantly. Daddy, church, and Gage. That's all I remember. But I don't remember how they go together, Mommy. Rachel hugged her tightly. It will be all right, she said, but the weight on her heart did not lessen. Hello, ma'am, the reservations clerk said. Hello? Rachel tightened her grip on both Ellie and the phone. I think I can get you to Bangor, ma'am, but you're going to be getting in very late. That doesn't matter, Rachel said. Do you have a pen? It's complicated. Yes, right here, Rachel said, getting a stub of pencil out of the drawer. She found the back of an envelope to write on. Rachel listened carefully, writing down everything. When the airline clerk finished, Rachel smiled a little and made an O with her thumb and forefinger to show Ellie that it was going to work. Probably going to work, she amended. Some of the connections looked very, very tight, especially in Boston. Please book it all, Rachel said, and thank you. Kim took Rachel's name and credit card number. Rachel hung up at last, limp but relieved. She looked at her father. Daddy, will you drive me to the airport? Maybe I ought to say no, Goldman said. I think I might have a responsibility to put a stop to this craziness. Don't you dare, Ellie cried shrilly. It's not crazy, it's not! Goldman blinked and stepped back at this small but ferocious outburst. Drive her, Irwin, Dory said quietly into the silence that followed. I've begun to feel nervous too. I'll feel better if I know Lewis is all right. Goldman stared at his wife and at last turned to Rachel. I'll drive you, if it is what you want, he said. Rachel, I'll come with you if you want that. Rachel shook her head. Thank you, Daddy, but I got all the last seats. It's as if God saved them for me. Irwin Goldman sighed. At that moment, he looked very old, and it suddenly occurred to Rachel that her father looked like Judd Crandall. You have time to pack a bag if you want, he said. We can be at the airport in 40 minutes, if I drive the way I used to when your mother and I were first married. Find her your tote bag, Dory. Mommy, Ellie said. Rachel turned toward her. Ellie's face was now sheened with a light sweat. What, honey? Be careful, Mommy, Ellie said. 49. The trees were only moving shapes against a cloudy sky, backlit by the glow from the airport not too far distant. Lewis parked the Honda on Mason Street. Mason bordered Pleasant View on its south side, and here the wind was almost strong enough to rip the car door out of his hand. He had to push hard to shut it. The wind rippled at his jacket as he opened the Honda's hatch and took out the piece of tarpaulin he had cut and wrapped around his tools. He was in a wing of darkness between two streetlights, standing on the curb with the canvas-wrapped bundle cradled in his arms, looking carefully for traffic before crossing to the wrought iron fence which marked the boundary of the graveyard. He did not want to be seen at all if he could help it, not even by someone who would notice him and forget him the next second. Beside him, the branches of an old elm groaned restlessly in the wind, making Lewis think of jackleg necktie parties. God, he was so scared. This wasn't wild work. It was mad work. No traffic. On the Mason Street side, the street lamps marched away in perfect white circles, casting spotlights on the sidewalk, where during the days after Fairmont Grammar School let out, boys would ride bikes and girls would jump rope and play hopscotch, never noticing the nearby graveyard, except perhaps at Halloween, when it would acquire a certain spooky charm. Perhaps they would dare to cross their suburban street and hang a paper skeleton on the wrought iron bars of the high fence, giggling at the old jokes. It's the most popular place in town. People are dying to get in. Why is it wrong to laugh in the graveyard? Because everyone who lives there is always in a grave mood. Gage, he muttered. Gage was in there, behind that wrought iron fence, unjustly imprisoned under a blanket of dark earth. And that was no joke. Gonna break you out, Gage, he thought. Gonna break you out, big guy, or die trying. Lewis crossed the street with his heavy bundle in his arms, stepped up on the other curb, glanced both ways again, and tossed the canvas roll over the fence. It clinked softly as it struck the ground on the far side. Dusting his hands, Lewis walked away. He had marked the place in his mind. Even if he forgot, all he really had to do was follow the fence on the inside until he was standing opposite his Civic, and he would fall over it. But would the gate be open this late? He walked down Mason Street to the stop sign, the wind chasing him and worrying his heels. Moving shadows danced and twined on the roadway. He turned the corner onto Pleasant Street, still following the fence. Car headlights splashed up the street, and Lewis stepped casually behind an elm tree. It wasn't a cop car, he saw. Only a van moving toward Hammond Street, and probably the turnpike. When it was well past him, Lewis walked on. Of course it will be unlocked. It's got to be. He reached the gate, which formed a cathedral shape in wrought iron, slim and graceful in the moving wind shadows thrown by the streetlights. He reached out and tried it. Locked. You stupid fool, of course it's locked. Did you really think anyone would leave a cemetery inside the municipal city limits of any American city unlocked after 11 o'clock? No one is that trusting, dear man, not anymore. So what do you do now? Now he would have to climb, and just hope no one happened to glance away from the Carson show long enough to see him monkeying up the wrought iron like the world's oldest, slowest kid. Hey, police. I just saw the world's oldest, slowest kid climbing into Pleasant View Cemetery. Looked like he was dying to get in. Yeah, looked like a grave matter to me. Kidding? Oh no, I'm in dead earnest. Maybe you ought to dig into it. Lewis continued up Pleasant Street and turned right at the next intersection. The high iron fence marched along beside him, restlessly. The wind cooled and evaporated the drops of sweat on his forehead and in the hollows of his temples. His shadow waxed and waned in the streetlights. Every now and then he glanced at the fence, and then he stopped and forced himself to really look at it. You're going to climb that, baby? Don't make me laugh. Lewis Creed was a fairly tall man, standing a bit over 6'2", but the fence was easily 9 feet high, each wrought iron stave ending in a decorative arrow-like point. Decorative, that is, until you happened to slip while swinging your leg over, and the force of your suddenly dropping 200 pounds drove one of those arrow points into your groin, exploding your testicles. And there you would be, skewered, like a pig at a barbecue, hollering until someone called for the police, and they came and pulled you off and took you to the hospital. The sweat continued to flow, sticking his shirt to his back. All was silent, except for the faint hum of late traffic on Hammond Street. There had to be a way to get in there. Had to be. Come on, Lewis, face the facts. You may be crazy, but you're not that crazy. Maybe you could shinny up to the top of that fence, but it would take a trained gymnast to swing over those points without sticking himself on them. And even supposing you can get in, how are you going to get yourself and Gage's body out? He went on walking, vaguely aware that he was circling the cemetery, but not doing anything constructive. All right, here's the answer. I'll just go on home to Ludlow tonight and come back tomorrow, in the late afternoon. I'll go in through the gate around 4 o'clock and find a place to hole up until it's midnight or a little later. I will, in other words, put off until tomorrow what I should have been smart enough to think of today. Good idea, oh great Swami Lewis. And in the meantime, what do I do about that great big bundle of stuff I threw over the wall? Pick, shovel, flashlight. You might as well stamp grave robbing equipment on every damn piece of it. It landed in the bushes. Who's going to find it, for Christ's sake? On measure, that made sense. But this was no sensible errand he was on, and his heart told him quietly and absolutely that he couldn't come back tomorrow. If he didn't do it tonight, he would never do it. He would never be able to screw himself up to this crazy pitch again. This was the moment, the only time for it he was ever going to have. There were fewer houses up this way. An occasional square of yellow light gleamed on the other side of the street, and once he saw the gray-blue flicker of a black and white TV. And looking through the fence, he saw that the graves were older here, more rounded, sometimes leaning forward or backward, with the freezes and thaws of many seasons. There was another stop sign up ahead, and another right turn would put him on a street roughly parallel to Mason Street, where he had begun. And when he got back to the beginning, what did he do? Collect $200 and go around again? Admit defeat? Car headlights turned down the street. Lewis stepped behind another tree, waiting for it to pass. This car was moving very slowly, and after a moment a white spotlight stabbed out from the passenger side and ran flickering along the wrought iron fence. His heart squeezed painfully in his chest. It was a police car, checking the cemetery. He pressed himself tight against the tree, the rough bark against his cheek, hoping madly that it was big enough to shield him. The spotlight ran toward him. Lewis put his head down, trying to shield the white blur of his face. The spotlight reached the tree, disappeared for a moment, and then reappeared on Lewis's right. He slipped around the tree a little. He had a momentary glimpse of the dark bubbles on the cruiser's roof. He waited for the taillights to flare a brighter red, for the doors to open, for the spotlight to suddenly turn back on its ball joint, hunting for him like a big white finger. Hey you behind that tree. Come on out where we can see you, and we want to see both hands empty. Come out now. The police car kept on going. It reached the corner, signaled with sedate propriety, and turned left. Lewis collapsed back against the tree, breathing fast, his mouth sour and dry. He supposed they would cruise past his parked Honda, but that didn't really matter. Parking from 6 p.m. to 7 a.m. was legal on Mason Street. There were plenty of other cars parked along it. Their owners would belong to the scattering of apartment buildings on the other side of the street. Lewis found himself glancing up at the tree he had hidden behind. Just above his head, the tree forked. He supposed he could. Without allowing himself to think about it further, he reached into the fork and pulled himself up, scrambling with his tennis shoes for purchase, sending a little shower of bark down to the sidewalk. He got a knee up, and a moment later, he had one foot planted solidly in the crotch of the elm. If the police car should happen to come back, their spotlight would find an extremely peculiar bird in this tree. He ought to move quickly. He pulled himself up onto a higher branch, one which overhung the very top of the fence. He felt absurdly like the 12-year-old he supposed he had once been. The tree was not still. It rocked easily, almost soothingly, in the steady wind. Its leaves rustled and murmured. Lewis assessed the situation, and then, before he could get cold feet, he dropped off into space, holding on to the branch with his hands laced together over it. The branch was perhaps a little thicker than a brawny man's forearm. With his sneakers dangling about 8 feet over the sidewalk, he pulled himself hand for hand toward the fence. The branch dipped, but showed no sign of breaking. He was faintly aware of his shadow following along on the cement sidewalk below him, an amorphous black ape shape. The wind chilled his hot armpits, and he found himself shivering, in spite of the sweat running down his face and neck. The branch dipped and swayed with his movements. The farther out he moved, the more pronounced the dip became. His hands and wrists were getting tired now, and he was afraid that his sweat-greasy palms might slip. He reached the fence. His tennis shoes dangled, perhaps a foot below the arrow tips. The tips did not look blunt at all from this angle. They looked very sharp. Sharp or not, he suddenly realized it was not just his balls that were at risk here. If he fell and hit one of those things dead on, his weight would be enough to drive it all the way up into his lungs. The returning cops would find an early and extremely grisly Halloween decoration on the Pleasant View fence. Breathing fast, not quite gasping, he groped for the fence points with his feet, needing a moment's rest. For a moment he hung there, his feet moving in an air dance, searching but not finding. Light touched him, and grew. Oh, Christ, that's a car. There's a car coming. He tried to shuffle his hands forward, but his palms slipped. His interlaced fingers were coming apart. Still groping for purchase, he turned his head to the left, looking under his straining arm. It was a car, but it shot through the intersection up the street without slowing. Lucky. If it had, his hand slipped again. He felt bark sift down into his hair. One foot found purchase, but now his other pants leg had caught on one of the arrow points, and Christ, he wasn't going to be able to hang on much longer. Desperately, Lewis jerked his leg. The branch dipped. His hand slipped again. There was a mutter of tearing cloth, and then he was standing on two of the arrow points. They dug into the soles of his tennis shoes, and the pressure quickly became painful, but Lewis stood on them anyway, the relief in his hands and arms.
Oh my gosh. I am really tired. So I'm gonna go ahead and get out of here. I'll be on in the morning, and I'll probably play a video game, or I might do this more. We'll see. But anyway, have a good night. Peace out. Love you. Thank you for lurking. Thank you for listening to Pet Cemetery with me. But I gotta go. Peace out. Later. Love you. Love you.